open the meeting. Advise everyone that we are live streaming to the community via the City of Hobart YouTube channel. And so if you can wait till I announce you before speaking so that everyone knows who's speaking. I'd like to request that mobile phones be turned off or to silent. I note that we have all elected members here except for Alderman Zuko, who is on a leave of absence, and Councillor Sherlock is not here yet, but may be coming later. Haven't had an apology yet from her. So I would like to start with an acknowledgement to country and just acknowledge that we are meeting on the land of the Milwanina people who lived here for hundreds of generations in this part of Lutruwita, Tasmania. Lived here for hundreds of generations before the summer of 1804 when the Europeans arrived and changed their lives and their community and their society forever. I would like to also acknowledge the contemporary Tasmanian Aboriginal community, the Palawa people, and thank them for their work in preserving and promoting Aboriginal culture. Thank you. The minutes of our meeting from the 17th of July. Would someone like to move those?
Lord Mayor.
Moved by Deputy Lord Mayor, seconded by Alderman Barakis. Any discussion about the minutes? There being none, I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Are there any items on either the open or the closed that anyone would like to propose is changed in the agenda? Yes.
I was just asking
Councillor
the Chair
Lobo.
if we could bring forward item 20. There are a number of people in the crowd in the gallery here for that item.
I need a seconder for that proposal. Seconded by Councillor Posselt. Any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. So that was item 20. Is it? When did you want that brought forward to? Right at the beginning?
I think so, yes, to allow the
officer reports.
allow
Okay.
public members to go home.
Good. Item 5 is notification of council workshops. There have been a number since we last met. So just recording that we had the rating and valuation strategy on the 31st of July. And there was the global approaches to placemaking for Elizabeth Street plan on the 3rd of August. On the 7th of August, there was a workshop on the Capital City Strategic Plan. And on the 21st of August, there was a workshop that covered the North Hobart Neighbourhood Plan, an annual plan report, and international relations policy. So that was all the workshops. We don't have to move those, do we? A notification. Okay, item 6 is public question time. Are there any questions on notice? None that have been registered. Are there any from the floor? None. We will move on now to item 7 is petitions.
Lord Mayor, did you have any communications from the Chair? You missed that.
Oh, did I?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, and I do. It is this book, actually. Thank you for reminding me. So I do have a book that was presented to Council at the recent exhibition in Town Hall. It was presented to the City from St Giles, which is one of our wonderful charities here in Hobart. It actually has an 85-year history, and this book was published as part of their 85th birthday celebrations. So I'd like to thank St Giles for all their work and thank them for their book, and we'll put this in the Henry Hunter reading room downstairs for people to have a look at. Thank you. Okie doke. So item 7 is petitions. Are there any petitions? There are none. Supplementary items. There are none. Item 9 is indications of pecuniary and conflicts of interest. Would anyone like to declare that they have a conflict with any of the items on the agenda? There being none, we will move on to the first of the reports, and because of that motion, we will go straight to item 20. And I'd like to invite somebody to move the recommendation.
I'm happy to move it.
Moved by Councillor Harvey, seconded by Councillor Posselt. So, who'd like to speak to the recommendation? Councillor Lohberger.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I just wanted to speak quickly on this one. I understand that there is a search, or the state government has a need to identify a site for an AFL training facility that is quite large, very large in fact. I just wanted to say, and I'm going to move an amendment to this effect as well after I speak here, that I don't believe that Cornelian Bay or the Queen's Domain are suitable areas for such a proposal, mainly due to the existing strong community use of those areas and the lack of any alternative areas for people who already use these places to go if they are displaced by the AFL Training Centre. I also think the scale of it is well oversized for some of these sites, and that these places at Cornelian Bay and Queen's Domain are long-standing places of open public space that this particular proposal I don't believe is suitable for. So I will be moving an amendment, and I have circulated that amendment to everyone. If we could get it on the screen, Mr Baxter, that'd be great. And I reserve my right to speak to the amendment.
Sure. Was there a seconder for... Well, we'll see if anyone else knows about the amendment. Alderman Bloomfield. And we're just waiting for the amendment to go up, I think.
Well, while we're waiting,
yeah.
Can I ask a question? Can anyone confirm that Cornelian Bay and the Domain have been shortlisted by the AFL? Do you have any confirmation that they have been shortlisted?
They have not been shortlisted to our knowledge.
Okay. Will they be shortlisted?
I don't know.
Now, what do we know? Do we know anything?
We don't know about any specific sites that the Tasmanian government have selected in the city of Hobart.
Okay. It's rather strange that we've had no correspondence as to what potential sites there might be. Yep. Okay. Thank you.
So the
Can you read it out?
correspondence at this stage has been about the actual, more of the facilities as set out in the contract, the required size of facilities.
But we don't know if anything's included in Hobart.
I think the contract does say it needs to be close to the Hobart CBD, whatever close means. Okay, so was there a seconder for... Oh yeah, Alderman Bloomfield. Okay, would you like to speak to your amendment, Councillor Lohberger?
Well, I may as well, yes. Look, it pretty much just sums up what I said. Look, I just don't believe those spots are suitable. There are huge numbers of public users of those sites in all sorts of different ways, from formal sports to informal recreational users, neighbours, and just people who value the open space being so close to the city. It strikes me as totally unsuitable that we displace all those people from these community facilities in order to put an AFL facility on top of the space, which is then apparently going to encourage more community sport. It makes no sense, and I think it's wise to get in early about these areas and to say quite clearly to the government and the AFL task force that these areas are not for sale. They are not up for grabs. They are already used. I think that's pretty clear. The amendment also calls for the council to write to the government and request a meeting with the minister just to discuss this. And then part 3 is the existing part 3 of the recommendation. It's just been moved down a couple of spaces. So look, I'd invite any debate on this from my colleagues, but I think it's a pretty clear issue. Those places are community places. They're not for the AFL. Thank you.
So I'd like if we can speak to the amendment first before we speak to the other item.
Certainly, if I
Councillor Posselt.
may ask you a question or two, Lord Mayor. The first is, I believe an officer has prepared a map of Cornelian Bay that's able to be displayed on the screen, and the question is, what area does the council constitute as Cornelian Bay? Because that directly responds to this item.
So is there an image?
Yes.
Is there a reason that image wasn't included in the report?
Because it's to the amendment.
I see.
And I do thank Councillor Lohberger for sharing his amendment, because it did allow me to do some homework today. Thank you. So as I understand it, but the Director can clarify that the green shaded areas are considered Cornelian Bay for the purpose of naming. I understand that many residents are concerned in particular about the section of fields between the Brooker Highway and the playground and the water, if you will. Yes, thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. That's my understanding, is that many residents are concerned about that area, and that area does have very high usage. However, it's relevant to point out that it also includes a fairly underutilised section that's wrapped around the corner into Selfs Point. The second question I had, Lord Mayor, is do any relevant directors or general manager understand that there is a community use of these high performance centre facilities, or are they exclusive to the AFL players and associated people?
So I'll see whether there's, yeah.
Lord Mayor, as the report indicates, part of the agreement requires development of community partnerships and programs and access to broader social and community benefits. There's no minimum or maximum requirement that's been outlined so far, but it is a component of the proposal that was put forward to the city.
Thank you, CEO. So if I just add some comments to the amendment. I don't support part 2 of the amendment. The reason why I don't support that, I hear the community's concerns, and I hear the concerns about the Queen's Domain as well. These are very important. However, I think it's just cutting our nose off to spite our face at the moment. We don't know what the state government want. We don't know the details of what they want. And Cornelian Bay, as illustrated by the map, is a much larger site than what many people realise. So I don't think that it's wise to rule out sites at this particular juncture, but I certainly have no predetermined thoughts on Cornelian Bay moving forward. Should a proposal be inappropriate for that area when we have a proposal in front of us, then I will duly vote against that proposal. I just think that we're a little bit premature here. So I can support point 1 and point 3, but not point 2 at this stage. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Can I seek clarification from Councillor Posselt about where he is thinking, like the cemetery? Is that what you're on the map? Where else is there in Cornelian Bay that you were thinking is available?
The area known as Rugby Park is considered Cornelian Bay.
Oh, the rugby centre.
So everywhere shaded green, that very light green, is
the hockey centre.
Cornelian Bay by planners here. So if we pass the amendment, everything shaded in green will be voiced strongly against using. But the rugby fields are really well used, but there is an area behind the rugby fields that are not well used at all. So as I said, I think it's preempting something when we don't have all the information.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Harvey.
Just to answer Alderman Councillor Posselt's thing about the land behind the rugby field, you're referring to the old wetlands area. Anyway, that land is earmarked for the expansion of the sewage works anyway. So I think the main area in question here is the sports fields on the other side of the Brooker, between there and Cornelian Bay and the cemetery. But I don't think that's a very suitable spot, and we've already had quite a number of emails from residents who use that spot daily. I also use that spot to walk my dogs. It's a wonderful community space. Any weekend you'll see a multicultural sports bonanza on the site. There's cricket, there's volleyball, soccer going on. It's a really well-loved community facility, and I don't know whether the AFL could create such a space within their proposal, but at this stage I don't want to see that area spoiled. I think it's a community space and it should always be retained as a community space. The other space, which we don't know whether it's on the short list or not, but the domain's been suggested might be, that's also a people's place as well and not to be developed. I think we've got protection for the domain through you, Lord Mayor, to relevant officers. What sort of protection is offered for that space? I think it's enshrined in some sort of regulation or...
For the people, isn't it?
You're all new, no one knows anything. Where's Neil?
Alderman Harvey, through me, please, and through the CEO.
With respect, Councillor Harvey, we can find that information out for you and take that question on notice. There might not be anyone here that can answer that
but I
question.
think it's pretty common knowledge, but unfortunately we don't have anyone who knows.
All right. Further discussion on the amendment, Alderman Barakis.
On the amendment, Lord Mayor, look, similar to Councillor Basalt, I think he and I were going to say similar things there. I wouldn't want council to be preempting anything that might happen in regards to this. As has been said, we don't really know too many of the details. I do appreciate, and like everyone else here, received a number of emails regarding Cornelian Bay. The concerns about what we might lose out if an inappropriate development was to occur on Cornelian Bay. I might just foreshadow, I guess, an alternative amendment. I haven't got a problem with part one of the amendment.
Sorry, I can't foreshadow it, but we can't discuss it until we've dealt with this. I can't have more than one.
No, that's what I'm foreshadowing. That's what I'm foreshadowing. Yeah, Lord Mayor. Perhaps change. I would prefer changing part two, that council advises the state government of its intention to preserve public open space, access to sport and other long-standing community amenities, and ask that that be taken into consideration rather than preempting particular areas that we don't want it to occur here, we don't want it to occur here. As Councillor Basalt said, Cornelian Bay is a quite a broad area. I think it's better for our relationship management in regards to this issue, and as far as ensuring that we do have a seat at the table. I think this has been discussed numerous times with other aspects of the whole AFL and stadium issue. I think if we want to have our concerns and have the issues that we want to bring forward taken into consideration properly, and us have a seat at the table when those considerations are being made, I think this is a more mature way of doing it, perhaps for lack of better words. And I think us preempting and trying to effectively act as advocates or trying to dictate terms to the state government, I don't think we'll end up getting the result that we want. Not saying we shouldn't make those concerns known, and I think we should definitely ask and expect that these get taken into consideration, but I wouldn't want us to be preempting any outcomes, especially when we know so little. This is just early stages of what will be a long process. So I'd rather us make it clear that we want to protect these aspects of Cornelian Bay or the Queen's Domain or any other areas that might be taken into consideration, and I think we should do that quite assertively. But I think if we start saying we're going to rule out anything happening here or anything happening here, I just don't think that we'll be given that seat at the table or listen to that strongly. So I'd be suggesting that as a alternative. Like I said, I'll put it forward as a foreshadowed motion, but I won't move it just yet.
Further discussion on the amendment?
Yes, Lord Mayor, speaking to the amendment, but it's kind of tied up in really the motion that we have before us. I mean, it's an additional. The amendment is an additional 2 clauses to the motion. I appreciate the amendment. I appreciate the concerns of the public who have rallied around an area they love of Hobart. Cornelian Bay is a very special place for lots of reasons. I got married there. That was one of the reasons that was pretty special for me. But regardless, it is a precious part of Hobart's open space sporting fields, and as co-chair of the Healthy Hobart portfolio with Councillor Sherlock, I have real concerns about how this approach to council is being made. It's a very strange way of doing business as a state government, to kind of put this idea kind of out there, but not out there, without any clear path or knowledge as to where this training facility might land. So I think that what we're looking at is completely around the wrong way. It's completely really not looking at the sporting needs of Southern Tasmania as a whole. We're just talking about the AFL needs, whereas an AFL need may displace already used and loved grounds where we play hockey and soccer and various other, and cricket and all sorts of other things. So, you know, we don't know what we're working with. So and this may be an additional foreshadowed motion, Lord Mayor, so I'll read it out, and I have sent it to everybody. It's very simple. So if you'll bear with me, I don't know that it needs to replace this, but it is something that I think could be really, rather than putting the cart before the horse, it's really looking at a strategic approach to finding solutions for outdoor sporting facilities, which we know, particularly after the World Cup, Women's World Cup, we know that there is so much interest in other sports such as soccer. But I foreshadow, as an additional motion perhaps, that the council work with the state government and Southern Tasmanian councils for an overall plan for sporting facilities across all codes for outdoor sport.
I just wonder whether the movers of the amendment would be happy to...
Quite happy to accept that in as a point 4.
Okay.
If that's what you're seeking, Deputy Mayor.
Yes, well, yeah, I don't really like point 3, to be honest. I'm not really enamoured with that, so it could be taken as a separate motion.
Okay.
It doesn't counter the other motion necessarily.
Yeah, I've also got Baracus as one, but that's foreshadowed if this one doesn't. It's cleaner if we can add it in. And
can I have advice on that then, through you, Lord Mayor?
Well, advice on what?
On if that is counter to what the motion is proposed.
I think so long as it's voted on as part, but we can vote on these items separately if you like. So if they're happy to accept it into their motion, then and we take each item separately, that might be the best way. Okay.
I'm happy to accept that. I'm not sure about Alderman Bloomfield.
Okay. Further discussion, Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I see the amended motion moved by Councillor Van Looberger is commendable, and I thank him for bringing this up in our discussions. Now, the element 1 is very clear for me. We're simply going to write and request for a meeting, so I have no problem with that. I will support that. Number 2, where the issue seems to be a bit of a misunderstanding, or we have a different perspective and interpretation on that. This is my take on that particular number 2. It is not going to set a precedent or preempt anything. It is not preempting anything at all. For me, what we are doing as a council, and it is under the Act, we are representing the interest of the people we represent. And so all what we're doing, we're playing an advocacy role in this particular chamber because of what we have had. And all what he's trying to do, I think, in number 2, that we strongly recommend to the state. That's all it's asking. We are recommending. We are not advising, we are not asking them to do things, we're strongly recommending, and it is entirely up to the government then to take that recommendation or not. So I see that differently. Number 3 is one, there's a bit of a concern, but I will look at it with the one that has been mooted by the deputy, and then vote accordingly as to which way I think it'll read for me. Thank you.
Further discussion on the amendment? No further discussion? I might say a few words. Yeah, I think it is absolutely our role, as Councillor Dutta said, to advocate on behalf of the community about these public assets. Let's not forget that both Cornelian Bay and the Domain are public parklands, and this proposal will transfer wherever it goes into the main ownership and management of the AFL, which is one of the wealthiest codes in the country. I personally think they should purchase a piece of land for their high performance centre rather than drawing on public parkland and public open space, because my understanding of all of the facilities that do exist on the mainland is this community access is very limited. And even our own elite sporting facilities, we do limit community access, and we know in places like South Hobart, where there is aspirations to have elite facilities, the conflict between local community use and the elite sporting facilities is quite stark. On our own North Hobart Oval, we treasure that facility, particularly for its elite facility, and it does mean it's restrictive for the community. So this is about being proactive. This process has been, as the Deputy Lord Mayor said, pretty odd. I noticed in July in the paper some former footballer has been given the job of going around to identify sites, helping the state government to identify sites that might be suitable. So, you know, the state government has got certain people at the table, but they haven't invited any council members, council mayors or councillors from any council. Regardless of whether we're proactive and say what our strong views about our public open space are to the state government, or we don't, there's no real intention of involving councils in that sort of very strategic planning sense at this stage, and that's why it's so important for us to say politely but clearly our views on this matter. There's nothing in this resolution that's disrespectful. It's simply saying what we, based on our very deep knowledge of our city, believe is important for them to be aware of. I am aware that through the Greater Hobart partnership process that there are sites that may be very suitable in other municipalities, and we are meant to be really working as a Greater Hobart group. We've now got a Greater Hobart plan, and I do feel that 3 and 4 deputies 4 do actually work together, because it's about thinking regionally, asking the state government to work with all of the Southern and Greater Hobart councils to identify the best place for Greater Hobart, and to think about not just this facility but all of the sporting codes that are going to need extra facilities and extra growth. The final point I want to make is that I really think a key part of this is recognising what the future is for City of Hobart. We are going to become a denser part of Greater Hobart. We are hopefully going to have more medium density options, more options for people to live in apartments, and green preserving as much green open space as we can get is super important strategically for the growth of our city. There's not a huge amount of green open space in the northern part of the municipality, and Cornelian Bay is really, and the Domain is going to be incredibly strategically important as we grow and become a denser city. So I think I support the amendment. I think it's really important for us to make a firm communication at this point, because things can move very quickly, and it's better that we identify those issues early on. Thank you. So I'm going to put each of the, well, I'll put 4 separately, I think. I'll put the amendment, then I'll put 3, and then I'll put 4.
Amendment, and then if the amendment fails, not foreshadowed.
Sure, yep.
And Lord Mayor, should we not pass the amendment and then allow debate on the substantive motion, which has not been allowed yet?
Yes, absolutely, yep. So that'll be the motion as amended, it'll be?
Yes.
Yep, okay. So I'm going to put 1 and 2 together, that amendment. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Again say no.
Aye.
Show of hands, all those in favour?
Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Lohberger, Alderman Bloomfield, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Harvey, the Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor.
And against?
Alderman Barakis, Councillor Elliott, Councillor Passelt, Councillor Kelly. That amendments 1 and 2 are carried.
Okay, now I will put item 4, which is, if the Deputy can read it out
Yes,
again.
sure. Where is it? What do you want to do? That the council work with the state government and Southern Tasmanian councils for an overall plan for sporting facilities across all codes for outdoor sport.
Okie doke. And the seconder for that, oh, that was accepted into the amendment. Okay. So all those in favour of that part of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. So we'll now go back to the substantive amendment as amended, which has now got 4 parts. Are there any further discussion on this motion as amended? Councillor Posselt.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, a few points to make, I guess, with regard to the way that we engage with the state government regarding this matter. The High Performance Centre, I believe, is estimated to cost $60 million, and in the current climate, that'll probably be 100. And I just think that it's wise to point out that many councils would be crying out for a state government to come with $100 million outreached to be able to build any form of infrastructure in their community. Having this facility in an appropriate location in the city of Hobart is a win on many different levels. The economic impact of having an AFL team and all of the associated personnel operating from within the municipality is quite substantial. Every day people will need lunch, coffee, breakfast, dinner. This is an employment opportunity as well, as often these facilities have things like hospitality included in them, so we can get some young people into work. We know that there's a very well patroned cafe at Bellerive Stadium, for example, that's associated with the Hurricanes, and many people from the park come up to collect a coffee and some breakfast or a snack with their kids while they're playing at the park. So these opportunities are really serious for the city, and I think it's short-sighted to just say, I don't support a stadium and therefore I don't support a high-performance centre, or I support a high-performance centre but not in our municipality. There's economic benefit, but there's also emissions benefits. If people are travelling between a future stadium, should it ever be built, and the high-performance centre, would we not want them to be travelling a short distance, or would we prefer them to be driving to Brighton twice a day in a team bus or in several cars? These are questions that we don't know the full operation and the full proposal yet, but I think that we should enter any debate with the state or any discussion with the state in good faith, recognising that there are actually significant benefits and that we could get a really great uplift to an area that is currently underdeveloped, that is not used heavily by the community. There are some old tip sites, for example, that are very poorly utilised, which $60 or $100 million would go a very long way to getting some good public space out of, in addition to the High Performance Centre. So I support us getting involved, and that's why I will be supporting the officer recommendation.
Okay. Any further discussion? Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It's a bit of a continuation of a bit of a sorry saga here, where we just don't have information. It's like my opinion on whether there's to be an AFL stadium, and my response to that is, until I know the plans, all of the details of it, I can't possibly say one way or the other. And it's unfortunate that the state government haven't given us the details of this, and it's reportedly there's to be an AFL-size ground, as Councillor Loberger said, also to a 9,000 square metre indoor training centre, which is quite big, gym, recovery area, tickets and so on. So it is a very big, substantial area, and no doubt it's no little wonder that residents of Cornelian Bay and people who use the domain recreationally are a bit twitchy about this. So I also agree that if someone wants to set up a facility in the right place, it's something that we should be looking at. At the end of the day too, if the state government want this bit of land, they will barge in and have the ability to take it, as I mean. But I think it's great what we're doing. We're advocating what the intentions of most of the ratepayers will be here, and it's just a real pity that we're once again lacking detail and being kept in the dark about a lot of this. So thank you.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, I will move the motion as amended. No, the motion has been amended.
3 replaced by 4.
That was the officer's recommendation.
Haven't voted
So the
on
motion, sorry, I think what I'm doing is the motion was initially moved by Councillor Harvey, seconded by Councillor Posselt. So we had a motion, we then had an amendment, so we now have a motion as amended, and now I'm going to put the motion as amended, which includes 4 parts. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no.
Aye.
Show of hands. All those in favour?
That's Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Posselt, Councillor Loberger, Alderman Bloomfield, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Harvey, the Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor.
And against?
Alderman Barakis, Councillor Elliott, Councillor Kelly. That's carried.
Okay, now we will go back to item 10, which is the North Hobart Neighbourhood Plan discussion paper, moved by Deputy Lord Mayor, seconded by Councillor Posselt.
Lord Mayor, I think this is a really exciting chance for the community to be consulted and part of the North Hobart Neighbourhood Plan discussion. So this discussion paper has been a wonder of, it's one of a number of our plans for neighbourhoods the City of Hobart is embarking on. It's a chance particularly for looking at a large section of North Hobart. It's a chance for the broader community, including business, to provide feedback during the consultation period, to comment on the plan, vision, directions and ideas. And it looks, I mean, you've all read the report, and I commend the report from officers and the suggestions, but I think it's a timely it looks at the timely upgrading of infrastructure, utilities and services, including public transport, open space and community facilities, and it's planning to support growth. We're looking over the next 30 years as part of the Greater Hobart Plan to have 10,300 additional new dwellings are expected, and importantly, 880 are expected in this area, and that is seen as achievable. So it's about land use, a very savvy way of making most of the land and its potential. So we have in front of us, there are 4 directions for North Hobart as part of this discussion paper. So the first one is being welcoming and inclusive with diversity of housing and employment types. Number 2 is creative and cultural neighbourhood that celebrates culture, food, creativity, heritage and diversity. And whoever had the opportunity to go to the 19th annual Hot August Jazz Festival really knows over the weekend how great North Hobart is as a destination already, but those things can be enhanced. Number 3 is ensuring that North Hobart is resilient with connection to Kananyi and the Queen's Domain as part of this, and how North Hobart sits in a grander landscape. And number 4 is making it an accessible neighbourhood. One of the things that have come out in the reports we have is that not a lot of the revenue from businesses in North Hobart necessarily is from the local community, and there's more of a chance to enhance that capacity. I think there's the possibility of having, it's talked about having a supermarket or some sort of possibility there, which I really support. So we can and should look to have a great economic output for North Hobart. We should expect locals to shop and play locally, and we should use the space that we have more effectively and creatively. So I wholeheartedly endorse this approach and hope that other members around the table can so too.
Councillor Posselt. Oh, and just a reminder to everyone, we've had feedback from the public listening tonight that they aren't picking up everybody's microphone. So maybe before you speak, just maybe moving your laptop tops down and trying to direct your voices towards your microphone. I know that we do have to do more work on improving the sound system here, but if people can just be mindful that apparently people are finding it hard to hear. So, sorry, Councillor Posselt.
That's okay, Lord Mayor. 2 points, if I may. The first being that very loud typing is coming through the microphones, and that's what's preventing people from hearing it. It's being picked up. The second one was I was the seconder for this motion, and in my naivety, I've forgotten that I can't amend if I second. Is it possible for me to rescind the seconder and get somebody else to do that?
Can I find another seconder? Councillor Lohberger is seconding now. Yes.
Thank you. Look, I've just got a very short, I guess, very low-key amendment, which is giving the residents in North Hobart and the community the power to talk a little bit more deeply about zoning and whether or not they think light industrial belongs in North Hobart, and that's up to them. I don't have a view on it either way, but the amendment is straightforward, and it just asks that on page 61 of the supporting information that a 4th dot point be added, which under opportunities in the area, which includes rezoning light industrial land to residential to provide a more diverse range of housing in close proximity to central Hobart, and on page 97 of the supporting information in the discussion paper, headed where to from here, add an additional 8th dot point which says what land use and zoning changes would you like to see? Just giving the community that little bit more power to talk about zoning and what they would like for their future. So I'd put that to my colleagues on council for their consideration.
Okay, is there a seconder for Councillor Posselt's amendment? No, Councillor Lohberger, you seconded a seconder for the amendments? That lapses without a seconder. Oh, Councillor Dutton, yep. Anyone would like to speak to the amendment? Councillor Kelly?
Look, I think this is adequately covered with all the documentation. It's just a consultancy at this stage, and I think it's a pointless exercise to do that. I think it's pretty much covered, and this is just a discussion paper, so that's my comment on the matter. Thank you.
Can I just ask the officers whether adding the amendments would be any challenge in terms of publication? Whether you've already done the layout and stuff. Mr. Van?
Yep, just through you, Lord Mayor. So Greg Van, Chief Strategic Planner in Residence. I think we could accommodate it. I don't think there would be any real technical issue with being able to do it. So, you know, in terms of production and so on.
Sure. Okay, further discussion on the amendment. I'd like to deal with the amendment before we move on. No further discussion. Okay, I'll put the amendment. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no.
No.
Show of hands, all those in favour.
Alderman Barakis, Councillor Passelt, Councillor Lohberger, Councillor Dutta, the Lord Mayor.
And against?
Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Elliott, Alderman Bloomfield, Councillor Kelly, Councillor Harvey, the Deputy Lord Mayor. That amendment is lost.
Okay, we'll go back to the substantive motion. Any further discussion on the recommendation, which was about the release of the discussion paper? Councillor Kelly?
Question for you, Lord Mayor, to the CEO, acting CEO. At the moment, apart from the workshop that we had the other night, which was an excellent opportunity to look at this document, very thorough document, there's been no consultation with any other groups or anyone else as yet?
Through you, Lord Mayor, you'll recall in the workshop that this is a consolidation of previous consultations that have happened with the North Hobart traders and the community. So this isn't a new piece of work necessarily. It's a refresh of that work that's been done with some updated consultancy work to add to it. So there has been consultation in the past, and this is building on that. And this discussion paper will now go back out to that community to seek their feedback on these new ideas that are being presented in this format. So it's a discussion paper prior to further consultation.
Councillor Dutta?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just have a question. You know, I look at the drafts, and the forward is by the acting CEO, and there's nothing from the Lord Mayor. And I was wondering if, in my experience, I think we've had the Lord Mayor also in there, and I'm just asking the question for clarification, please. Thank you.
My understanding is that the forward from the Lord Mayor will come in the final actual neighbourhood plan, that this is the discussion paper for the community consultation and that the Lord Mayor's forward would be in the final plan.
Further discussion on the discussion paper? There being none, can I ask one question actually before we go to vote? Is it, how long is the discussion paper out for? Is it just the month of September, or is it a little bit more than that?
Ask the officers
Through
that
you,
question.
Lord Mayor, 1 month is the post duration for the community to comment on it.
Okay. Yeah, it seems quite short to me, but anyway.
Can I offer a suggestion then?
Yes.
If we find during that month that we haven't had the level of consultation that we would expect, we can extend that for a period of time. We're not
Statutory things.
It's not a statutory requirement. If the officers agree.
That's correct, Lord Mayor.
Okay, thank you. All those in favour of the recommendation say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 11 is a lease of Part 1 Bell Street, part of 1 Bell Street, Newtown in Tasmania, a lease. We need a mover for this. Moved by Councillor Harvey, seconded by Councillor Lohberger.
What are you actually
I'm
moving?
going to move the first bid
First bit.
to grant a lease to the community shed.
Do you understand to do that?
Okay, so, Is that second? You're happy with the first, second?
Yes.
Yes. Okie doke. Any discussion? Councillor, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, in lots of ways, I welcome this application application for the men's shed to go on a relatively disused site. I have a couple of questions just around process really, and also a planning question. So through you to the appropriate officer, how do we usually take into account these ad hoc applications or requests to lease land?
CEO, how would we normally?
In my experience to date, there's been a range of ways. So we've had either proposals from organisations to lease that site, or we've gone out for an expression of interest process.
Right. Okay. The other through you, Lord Mayor, to the appropriate officer, just in relation to any should this be accepted tonight, should the men's shed proponents go ahead, are there any issues around stormwater or inundation in relation to this site?
I'll actually put that question to the Director of Acting Director.
Through you, Lord Mayor, any physical development would obviously need to go through the planning process, which would adequately assess any flooding or inundation impacts of what's proposed.
Another question. So we don't know if this land is subject to flooding or area. Is it an area of inundation currently?
In our flood maps, I guess, is it
Yes.
identified?
My understanding is that if this particular part of land isn't subject to inundation, certainly the area adjacent to it is, but I would have to take that question on notice.
Right. Okay. Lord Mayor, I don't think we've got enough of these community facilities. I know that men's shed have been very lacking in Hobart, which is unfortunate, and I appreciate the work that's gone into this and the fact that it's supposedly fully funded, which is I think a good news story for us. If we were leasing this land, I know that there is particular interest around the hockey centre, and I know that we'll be discussing that later on the closed agenda. I would like to think that we would be looking very hard at finding social housing solutions where we can. I don't know that this would be a suitable piece of land. However, this is one of our greatest priorities as well. So it's hard to juggle and weigh these things up. But I am in support of the motion put by Councillor Harvey. But I do think we're at this constant pressure of how we best utilise our land.
Further discussion, Councillor Loeb. Well, I think
You go. Yep.
It was just a question in this instance, and it was just off the back of the Deputy Lord Mayor, and I would actually like to echo everything that she said. But through you, how would this impact on, and not wanting to enter into anything that might need to be discussed in the close, but conversations that have been had around social housing for that site?
yeah, sure.
Lord Mayor, it's a different site.
Okay. Well, I had a bit of a confusion there on the spot there, but that's something.
Further discussion, Councillor Lohberger.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I just wanted to rise to support the proposal. I think these facilities are fantastic. I would point out there's already an existing very large social housing facility right across the road, right across the Brooker, so it's quite close. And I think this facility will be of great use to the residents of that social housing area, Queen's Walk Apartments. I would just want to just clarify what the Deputy Mayor was saying. It is a men's and women's shed. It is for all sexes. It's for everyone. It's not just for men, which I think is fantastic. And also think, as the Deputy Mayor pointed out, the fact that it's funded and has a board behind it of some very prominent Tasmanians are great things. So I will be voting to support Councillor Harvey's recommendable motion. And I encourage everybody else to do the same. Thank you.
Further discussion? Councillor Kelly?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, I'll be brief. This is a very professional application. I congratulate the proponents of this community shed for both sexes. Hobart, as someone mentioned before, has been lacking in this, especially a major capital city like us to date has not had this. And we get to keep the facility at the end of the lease. I think everyone wins here, and I encourage everyone to support this tonight. Thank you.
Councillor Harvey?
Yep. Look, one additional thing that's not really highlighted here is the opportunity to reduce waste to landfill by creating a facility for repair. So community sheds, men's sheds, this will be a community shed, everyone will be welcome, is an opportunity to collect otherwise material that might go to landfill and create a repair environment for things, especially if you look at what goes through the tip shop in South Hobart. A lot of stuff there could be repaired, but there's no capacity to do that, and there could be a really strong relationship with the tip shop to be able to acquire a lot of material down the track for repair and reuse and recirculation through the community. So I see this as a strong supporter of our waste strategy as well. But I think the social, mental, physical health benefits of places like this can't be underestimated. I think this will be, if it goes through all the process without any hiccups, will be a really beneficial facility for Hobart. And I do see it being well used into the future.
Discussion? Alderman Brooks, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just quickly, Lord Mayor, with my just concerns and confusion about the actual site being my only issue going into this. I think, as has been said, I think I visit men's sheds occasionally, and having a community shed that's neither man or for men or women, I think is fantastic. The number of people you talk to there that, especially of a certain age, that are lonely or just want someone to talk to, that don't normally go through, and especially old blokes don't necessarily go through, therapy or other things like that. They don't feel comfortable doing so, and are happy to just get on the tools with some mates and build some stuff. And usually the stuff that they build goes to other community groups and to help other organisations. I think it's such a strong community good if we have somewhere that could be used as an appropriate place for that in our city. As has been said, it's a bit of a pity that you've got the Claremont community shed, you've got human sheds, you've got sheds all over the place, but not in Hobart. And I think it would be a fantastic community good and something we should support.
Deputy Lord Mayor?
Yeah, just a question, Lord Mayor. Is it possible, and Councillor Harvey's suggestion about that repair cafe or similar would be, I think, it's a fantastic idea. Is there any way that we can suggest that, and I don't know that it needs to be part of the motion, but it might be taken on with information, but that solar panels are part of the build to try and reduce energy costs?
Might be the DA stage when it comes back to us, or?
We'll take your advice on that development application process.
Through you, Chair, that is not something that would be relevant for the planning application itself. Perhaps it could be negotiated through the lease, for example.
Yeah. The lease.
Yeah. So does that can that just be taken on? Does it need to be amended as such?
If you want it to be part of the condition of the lease, then we would see it as part of this amendment. Otherwise, it's something.
All right. If there's, would you
Okay,
like to
well,
move
maybe
the
just
amendment?
subtle advice.
About it
I might
being a
write to
condition.
them directly.
Sure, there'll be. Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a question through you. Just to put it in the context, I remember 3 years ago when CDAT, of which John Kamara, the Tasmanian of the year, is the president, were asking for a place to lease. There was a policy that we should ask for expression of interest so that it is open to everyone. And I'm wondering, in this context, could you please enlighten me if that is, would be fair and perceived to be fair?
So this was determined to meet the council's leases to not-profit organisation policy, so it met the criteria for that component, which is why it was presented to council as one of the options, or as an expression of interest process. It's not a process we have to go through as an expression of interest, but it meets the criteria of that leasing to not-for-profit organisations.
But I think Councillor Dutta's comment is that there could be other community not-profit organisations.
There may well be. That's exactly right.
Further discussion? Any further discussion? No? Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. If we were to go down the EOI pathway, which I actually think makes sense from a fairness point of view, what sort of realistic timeframes would we be looking at?
Yeah, that question. It's a good question because there is a funding commitment attached to this proposal, and so there would be a risk that these proponents would not be able to utilise that funding if they couldn't secure this lease. We would try to do it as fast as we could and offer the kind of minimum expression of interest timeframes, but I can't guarantee that it would take less than sort of 2 or 3 months at a minimum.
Okay, thank you. Well,
time we advertise and do all of those requirements.
Yeah, I'm in two minds about it because it's hard to know. Have we had any other approaches from people of late that are looking for places that might be potentially suitable also for this site? Have we had any recent?
To our knowledge in relation to this proposal, not for this site, no.
Thank you. Yeah, I am in two minds about it because I think it would, in fairness, we should ask the community if there's anything else out there. I mean, but then I also can see the immense value in the application itself, and just made a note here around the situation with homeschoolers where we had with Youth Arc, where something like this might actually be beneficial for those sorts of groups. Yeah, my number one preference would be to go to EOI unless it would mean that the funding on this project would lapse. So yeah, I'm in two minds.
Further discussion? Any further discussion? Councillor Posselt.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll keep this very brief. I also support this use of a pretty oddly shaped piece of land immediately adjacent to a highway. This seems to be a great use. Community sheds bring people together, and I'm all about anything that brings people together of any age group. Anything that raises relationships between people, promotes social cohesion, and that's what we need. I think it's really important for those who are not sure which way they're going to vote to realise that when a proponent comes to the council with fully funded, fully costed proposals, they are treated differently than when somebody says, we think we might need some land for project X, but have no details and no funding allotment. This is a very, as I think Councillor Lohberger pointed out, has a hard-hitting board that knows how to run things. It's secured funding from the federal Labor government and from the state government, so it has cross-party support. And when we get proposals as a council that are fully funded by other levels of government and in the community interest, I think an EOI process is not necessary and is only likely to lose the funding or overly complicate matters with red tape. So take those comments on board, and I'll be happy to support this.
Any further discussion? No further discussion. Yeah, I would like to say a few words. I did want to. I am a little bit torn about this, as with Councillor Elliott, because we actually did all receive, and the CEO, I think, received an email, and it was copied to all elected members on Friday, from the Hobart Women's Shelter, who said that they've been in discussion with the HCC for several years seeking any parcel of land owned by the HCC on which to build social housing for women. Following the meeting hosted by the Governor of Tasmania in March 2022, I spoke to all, this is from the CEO, all Greater Hobart mayors as a result of this Kingborough Council has arranged for a parcel of land to be made available to construct homes. The HWS, Hobart Women's Shelter, would like an equal opportunity, as has been accorded the Hobart Community Shed, to demonstrate how a parcel of land could be used for social housing, considering any potential site constraints and how they might be mitigated. And then they go on about a few other things and then say, in the interest of accountability, transparency of process, I would urge the Council to seek a broader expression of public interest in this site. So I think it is challenging because I very much appreciate and support the project, and I'd very much like to write to the funders and say, could you give the project just a couple more weeks so that we can say to our community we have gone through due process. Again, this is public land. We don't know who else does have funding. They may have, I know there's a lot of money around for housing, and there may well be organisations that have said as soon as you've got a parcel of land, the money is coming your way. So we won't know until we ask, in a sense, and so that's the challenge that we have, is that we have been asked to run a sort of proper process, even if it's brief, and even if we can still support the community shed. It'd be really lovely if we could actually see that kind of community shed and a Hobart Women's Shelter type of thing, but that would probably take too long. But yeah, I think it does leave me in a very difficult position, because I hear that concern, but I also very much support the proposal. I do think when it comes to public land, we have to have a really fair process that we can explain to the community why certain groups do get, facilitated to support, and other groups maybe don't have as an easier time. And the EOI processes do level the playing field. So it's very challenging. I don't want the group to lose the funding. I do support the project. I just would have liked a really tight EOI process so that we could explain ourselves very fairly to the community and other stakeholders who may well have projects that may not be suitable for this site at all, but at least they've got the chance to put their case. And if I could be persuaded that we could do the EOI process in 4 weeks or 5 weeks, I'd say, well, it's worth doing it just for that due process. But if it's 2 to 3 months and the funding is really at risk, then I am quite worried about it. We do have another item later in the agenda, and I'll certainly, if there's any way that we can actually move some of those requests for social housing on public land as fast as this one, then maybe we can sort of keep the confidence of the community that we're certainly pushing for the social housing projects as well. Thank you.
Have we already supplied some land for Hobart Women's Shelter in the past?
Actually, I think I think there was an expansion of their existing facility into St Wellesley Oval a few years ago. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Point of order, Lord Mayor. I just feel like some of this is probably breaching confidentiality. I'm not sure through you. I think we're discussing this in closed, are we not? The other stuff.
I don't think I've said anything about what's on the closed agenda. Okay. Okay, any further discussion? Councillor Kelly.
Through you, Lord Mayor, to the CEO, would this be appealable if we did decide ultimately, going for an expression of interest process, that the proponents were successful and a person who also expressed an interest for the same parcel land wasn't to get it? Would that be appealable by those people?
I don't think so, Councillor Kelly, if I could answer that. It would be the determination of the council on how they lease their land, so there wouldn't be an appeal process that would be relevant to that.
Thank you, because the reason I asked that is, this could go on for months, and look, we've seen the results of things being stalled lately and for some for good reasons, of course, but I just think, look, we should take this excellent opportunity while we can. It ticks so many boxes, and to delay, I think we're playing a very dangerous game here. So I'd fully support we just move with this. Thank you.
Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. All right, we will move on to item 11.
That was
Item 12, sorry. International Relations Policy. Someone like to move the recommendation?
Second.
So who was the first mover? Councillor Dutta, seconded by Councillor Harvey. Any discussion? Deputy Lord Mayor.
Just a question through you to the relevant director. We have existing sister city relationships, which are really important, particularly to those community members. Should we go ahead and endorse this tonight, what sort of would the changes to those existing relationships continue until such time we had more information to consider?
Ms Allen?
Through you, Lord Mayor, if I understand the question correctly, are you saying that we would continue with those relationships until such time as they are reviewed under this policy?
Yes.
The answer is yes.
Right, thank you. I just might make a point. I think those relationships, whilst we need to look at the value, some of those things are quite long-standing arrangements, and I think that conversation with those communities is really important. Should we do any review of sister city relationships?
Further discussion? Councillor Dutta?
I just have a question through you, Chair. With regards to the policy recommendation on page 36 and page 37, it's my understanding that the Module 1 strategic partnership will allow for multiple partnerships in a particular country. But if it's a sister city relationship, there's only one per country. Is that clear? And if it is, then I just...
Ms Allen?
Through you, Lord Mayor, that is correct.
Further discussion? Alderman Bloomfield?
Having had a little to do with international relations through Hobart City Council, I have been quite impressed with the bringing in line of this particular policy, because having watched prior years and prior to, in fact, 2018, where it was very difficult to assess how good a sister city was actually working as a relationship basis for our city, that these are actually going to bring these things in line and be kept to account, which I think is vital. The one thing I learned particularly about these is they can be quite expensive and time consuming, they use up resources, and this brings it back to say, is this actually giving us something appropriate, and what is it? So we define our benefits and we define our expenditure so that we can be more accountable to the public for what we actually spend on these types of areas, because particularly with things like travel and any other type of cost, we need to be more careful. This allows us to be more careful. So I do.
Further discussion? Councillor Dutta?
Thank you, Chair. My only concern here is with regards to the sister city for having a relationship, only one per country, as it were. When I think of it, and I'm thinking of it in the context of one country, if we were to relate this to Fiji or one of the Pacific Islands, I would totally support it. It's such a small place, there's no problem with it. But if you say one sister city per country and you take that into context of India, India is like Europe. With so many countries in Europe, India, the south is very different from the north. The north is very different from the west and east. And so, that's my concern, that's all. And I just wanted to know the rationale behind that? If I may just, ask the question. Thank you.
Director Allen.
Through you, Lord Mayor, the rationale is related to resource management. The sister city relationships are more intensive and we need to manage a finite number of those.
Yes.
If I could add a supplementary comment to that, this new policy wouldn't exclude us from having other relationships with cities in multiple arrangements in a country. It just wouldn't be a sister city arrangement, but it would certainly allow mutually beneficial arrangements between cities in a number of locations in a country or elsewhere. So that one city per country is very specific to the sister city arrangement.
Any further discussion? Alderman Brackus.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, it's a good thing that we're revisiting this, because I think these sister city programs and strategic partnerships, I think when done well, I think bring a lot of value to the city. It helps us form links and economic partnerships and cultural partnerships. I think when done poorly, it potentially risks getting turned into a junket program, which I think is why it's so important that we do give these sort of things proper consideration. Just on that though, in regards to on page 41 and 42 of the report, we've got the page for establishing an international partnership, the working form. How have we determined what's essential criteria and what's not essential criteria through you, Lord Mayor, in those categories?
Director Allen.
Through you, Lord Mayor, the essential criteria are related to, national foreign policy objectives and also meeting our own strategic objectives.
Brackus.
Lord Mayor, and thank you for the answer. The only reason I ask that is because some of the things that are in the non-essential criteria I would have considered as essential, if not more essential, for Council's strategic goals, given that they speak to the City of Hobart and the potential partner sharing commonalities such as diaspora culture, politics or geography. But more importantly, the other ones is there are existing connections between the city and potential partners which can be leveraged, and there is potential for cross-government and or sector industry collaborations to support the partnership. If we're not getting a tangible economic benefit to our city in forming these partnerships, I'd be asking why we'd be entertaining it in the first place. So I would think that would be, at least in my view, a very essential consideration. So it's a bit disappointing for me. Maybe I'm looking at this the wrong way, but it seems that factor is lower on the totem pole of priority as far as how we assess these things. Once again, I want to reiterate, I wouldn't want us to be duplicating on the work of DFAT and engaging international relations in that manner. I think we should be entering into these relationships with the intention of actually getting a benefit to the people of Hobart. And if we're not doing that, then we can just leave that to DFAT. They're very, very well funded, and I don't know if we need to be entering into that space. So I think we should be getting reasonably selfish in that regard and looking to see what we can get in benefit to for the people of Hobart in establishing these relationships. Because if those benefits aren't there, I wouldn't be supporting entering into any such relationships.
Any further discussion? Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, I am really comfortable with model number 1, the strategic partnerships, because as I read it, it relates to a tangible deliverable, like a project, but the sister city concept is something that I think is outdated. I mean, when you read a sentence there that sister city relationships are highly symbolic, and you can understand that in times before the world was so connected, but I think we learn from other countries all the time now, just the way that news and access to information works. I'll still be supporting the policy because I would each sister city arrangement would come to the council for approval, I would suspect. So, but yeah, just in terms of my views on it, strategic partnerships around specific objectives are good. Sister city, I don't see as much value in that and prefer to see it more project-based. Thanks.
Okay, any further discussion? I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 13, status of the urban canopy on public and private land. We have a recommendation moved by Deputy Lord Mayor, seconder for this, Councillor Harvey. Any discussion on the recommendation, Councillor Posselt?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just some questions to the relevant officer. If I may. What is the budget assigned specifically to street trees and arboriculture more generally for the city?
Director? CEO, acting CEO.
We'll pass that on to the Director.
Director AB.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. There is a team of people who are engaged at the council for looking after the council's street trees, but also trees in our open spaces and parks. We don't delineate between street tree costs of those and the other costs.
Councillor Posselt.
So what's the budget?
Clarifying, you're looking for the budget for new assets or new, or a maintenance of existing trees or new trees?
If we don't have a budget for the street trees, specifically street trees, then the second part of the questions, arboriculture more generally within the city.
Director AB.
Through you, Lord Mayor. I will have to take that question on notice in order to provide a proper response to the question.
Councillor Posselt.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Does the city have any formal policy to ensure that street trees are considered as a priority whenever any road reserve undergoes asset renewal or redesign?
Councillor AB. Oh, sorry, Councillor AB. Director AB. Congratulations.
Promoted again.
Through you, Lord Mayor, I'll ask Ms Wilson to provide further details of that.
Sorry, I should stand up. There was a previous motion from Council a few years ago that said as part of any capital works upgrades that we should consider street trees, footpath amenity and cycling. So we still do that. Does that answer the question?
Just does that include asset renewal as opposed to capital works?
I think we best take that on notice.
Maybe we need to get that circulated if it's now procedural, if it's a procedure of the council, so we understand what it says.
Lord Mayor, look, I welcome this report. This is a great report, and massive kudos to the team who have done it. The urban canopy is super important on so many different levels. From greening the city, from cooling the city, from preventing wind corridors. We know this is a genuine priority. In light of that, and in light of the report recognising that in some suburbs that our tree canopy has decreased, despite us trying our best to increase it, I would propose, and it might be superfluous, but this is the opportunity to do it. So I would propose an amendment if Mr Baxter can pop it on the screen. In light of the state of the canopy report and the loss of urban canopy in many suburbs, combining with road reserves showing the lowest density of tree canopy coverage, that 2 further dot points be added to the city's recommendation this evening. 5, the city develop a policy that the street trees team is consulted whenever road reserves, footpaths or stormwater infrastructure is renewed or redesigned, and enhancements to urban tree canopy are considered as a priority as part of that work. This policy should note that council favours plantings in the road reserve in preference to footpaths, even when that means a loss of on-street parking. And 6, the city undertake engagement with the Tasmanian state government to identify urban sites owned by the state suitable for enhanced tree planting and negotiate with them to achieve the desired outcome, even if that comes at some cost to the city of Hobart. The rationale is pretty clear. I think everyone can see what I'm trying to do. So I'll leave that there for my colleagues to debate.
Is there a seconder for Councillor Posselt's amendment? Councillor Dutta. So that's 5, an extra 5 and a 6, is that right? I can't quite
That's
see.
correct.
Yeah. Okay, discussion on the amendment. Otherwise I'll put the...
So part one of the amendment, Lord Mayor, seems to have been answered in that it's already considered not only for tree canopy but also for bike and pedestrian infrastructure. Is that not what I heard? So I would suggest that that's not a necessary part. Happy to support part 6 though. So maybe, I don't know.
You mean part 6A?
Oh, sorry.
6A.
Sorry, 6A, yeah.
We already do that.
We already do that, so I'd strike that out, suggest that that be struck out.
And then the following bit doesn't.
Okay. Any further discussion on the amendment? Can I ask a clarifying question actually? Is A actually adding to what we already have? Because a policy is a little bit firmer than a motion, like an amendment or something, but I don't know. And did we do we include the stormwater infrastructure and in your procedure that you have at the moment? I'm just wondering if it's duplicating or whether it's adding to what you've already got.
So you're correct in that it is a motion from a previous council, that it hasn't been made into a policy. So there is a difference there. In terms of the stormwater, I don't believe stormwater is considered in the current in the motion from the previous one.
So it would add stormwater to the procedure and it would make it a little bit more formal as a policy. Is that right?
Through you, Lord Mayor, yes, I understand that's the case. That the proposed wording would take the current process slightly further.
Okay. Any further discussion on the amendment? No? Oh, sorry. That's the Tasmanian government bit. Okay.
Can I just ask you one further question? Are the directors aware of any councils or cities using stormwater specifically and the process of catching stormwater to facilitate urban tree growth, which is why the stormwater component has been included specifically, in my understanding?
Through you, Chair, yes, we are aware of the ability to control stormwater through green spaces. Although I don't know that that's necessarily specifically to tree growth, but that is very much a focus of all of our neighbourhood plans, and it's a focus of our waterways unit to try and identify appropriate land to be able to provide a response to the stormwater in Hobart.
Okay, so if there's no further discussion on the amendment...
Look, only to say, speaking to the amendment, we do all this stuff as a matter of course. It's not like we don't. So whenever there's works that's being done, we look at plantings. Whenever, and we look at water sensitive urban design to some degree, and that's starting to roll out across Hobart with our new developments. Look at the Newtown development, a bit more planting in the street, opportunities arise. Having a policy that says we have to do it or we have to consider it, is it the same thing? I think we've already got a situation where we consider these things every time we do works. So I don't know whether this adds any value or just more confusion to the process, because I think we do this stuff anyway, and amendments on the run really bug me. So, you know, like I know the intent's good, but whether we needed this tonight, I don't think so. And the conversation is probably better to be had to see what goes on rather than putting up an amendment because you think you're adding value to something. So I'm not sure whether I want to support it or not.
Any further discussion, Alderman Barakis?
Just on what Councillor Harvey said in regards to Part 6, Part C of that, is that noting an existing policy or is that actually part of the new policy that's being proposed to be developed?
Policy is my reading of it.
Part A says a street team is consulted, that's part of the motion. Part B, enhancements are considered, but then Part C just says it is noted that. Is that an existing policy at the moment, or is this proposing a new policy? Maybe through you, if
Yeah,
Is there
sorry,
anything
that's
in
how I
existence?
read it, but.
Yeah, I'm just confused as to the wording of it.
Director Aby or Ms Wilson, did you want to, that would be.
Through you, Chair, there's a preference for planting trees within the footpath, so on-street parking is retained where possible. There have been some instances of loss of on-street parking, particularly where that was supported by the surrounding residents, but it's really very much dependent on each situation, the size of the footpath and all of those sorts of factors.
Alderman Baracus.
Lord Mayor, thank you. Look, I support doing what we can to improve our urban canopy. I don't propose supporting policies that specifically outline or target on-street parking as a way to address that. I think it's on-street parking at the moment. It's always a topic of quite hot contention, and especially in high-trafficked areas. And removing what's a ever decreasing commodity at the moment, and a very in-demand commodity, is not something I'd support as amendments on the run, as Councillor Harvey suggested. So I wouldn't be supporting it just based off Part C.
The discussion.
Am I able to rise just to respond to the amendments on the run?
No, I don't think
I find
so.
I find it an offensive
Someone
remark.
else might speak to that in your defence. Any further discussion
On the amendment.
Amendment. I'm going to rise to support it. As the person who did move an amendment on the run at a meeting about 5 years ago to get the procedure, sometimes the chamber is exactly where we do make change and take things that little bit further on behalf of the community. I think that having this council say that we want a policy on this is a good step forward. I also think this goes a little bit further than where we are at the moment, because it does name up stormwater infrastructure. I do think we need to say that we're okay with street trees going actually into the road reserve rather than footpaths, because I see a lot of trees going in, but the footpaths is actually sometimes the worst place because we've got quite narrow footpaths. So I think this does actually, and this isn't saying we're definitely going to do that, but it's just asking that a policy be developed, and I presume that would come back to us. So I think Part 6 is certainly good. I'm beastly careless about 5 and 7 as much, but I think Part 6 is useful. But I do also think, I take on board Councillor Harvey's feedback, and I do think, generally speaking, when we're looking at quite meaty amendments, it is helpful to circulate them to your colleagues sort of on the day of the meeting, so there can be a bit of a look and people have a chance to come back and ask you questions about it. But, that said, we're all busy and sometimes that doesn't happen. But I certainly don't see... I see that adding 6 will add to the intent of advancing our street tree strategy, which this report clearly... street tree and urban greening strategy, which this report clearly shows we've got a lot more work to do. And I think we're going to have to also increase the budget, but that's obviously a separate matter. Okay, I'll put the... Oh.
I'd like to quickly add too, not that any of you would know, but previous partner and I used to travel entirely by motorcycle. And that was for a number of years until there was an accident, and tree roots from a tree near the Globe Hotel, in fact, I think Antle Street, they had reached through the road and they had actually created cracks and jags that caught motorcyclist wheels regularly. We were quite lucky. We lost our motorcycle and he had a very damaged leg for quite some time, but the week before that another gentleman had also had his motorcycle caught on the same tree root, and he hit his head on one of the posts and he was still unconscious when we'd actually had our accident. So why I mention these things is that we have a few other elements that I think we need to be fair about and bring into this equation. when we bring in trees into road reserves and areas that are closer to traffic, we need to be aware that bicycles, motorcycles, possibly even e-scooters for all I know, will actually possibly be caught with potential tree root issues. Now, I appreciate that they can be ameliorated. We can do work to ensure that tree roots don't cause these troubles, but the more trees that we put in areas like that, the more work will need to be done on a consistent basis. I am in no way against increasing urban canopy. I have seen how great it can be in areas where we have a lot of it. But I do feel that we have to be a little bit more careful with where we put trees and understand that there is long-term maintenance that must be accounted for, because otherwise we can in fact hurt our community. I, for instance, would like to feel that we could, encourage more trees in backyards, front yards, other areas as well, not just in these areas. As I said, I'm not remotely against putting trees in streets and areas like that, but please understand there is a genuine impact on people when we don't get it right.
Okay, I'll put the amendment. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Say no. Aye. Show of hands. All those in favour.
Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Elliott, Councillor Purcell, Councillor Lohberger, Councillor Dutta, the Lord Mayor.
And against?
Alderman Barakis, Alderman Bloomfield, Councillor Kelly, Councillor Harvey and the Deputy Lord Mayor. The amendment's carried, 6-5.
And now I'll put the substantive motion as amended.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. That's what I was waiting for. So I think it's quite disturbing that we've lost 55 hectares of urban canopy on private land. And I know that the recommendation is that we focus on community education, incentives and further research. But in other states, they're starting to look at mandatory trees. Any new house has to have a big tree in the front over time and a smaller tree in the back over time. And I think regulation will probably come to the forefront eventually, because we've got a problem with, I think it's Planning Directive 5 through you to the Director of Planning. That's the planning directive that allows houses to build fence to fence and concrete their entire yard. Is it Planning Directive 5 I'm referring to?
Through you, Lord Mayor, I understand that those amendments were incorporated into the planning scheme, which did allow for greater building envelopes.
Which means you don't have to retain any green space on your property. And I think that's a mistake if we want to maintain a green canopy in Hobart in residential areas. So that needs to be looked at and amended at some point in time if we continue to see the trend of losing tree canopy in Hobart. And if our education program and our incentives don't work. So that's something we need to keep up our sleeve. And something else I'd like to raise is the way we manage open space. I've been banging on about this for a long time. The continual slashing and mowing of space that could become garden rather than just maintenance. So we have a maintenance program. We don't have a gardening program that potentially could supersede the maintenance program. And I watched a big area being slashed the other day, which didn't need to be slashed. The grass wasn't long enough to warrant slashing, but I assume it was scheduled. I'm not criticising the council for doing that work, but looking at what was being done, I thought was superfluous. So potentially areas like that could be allowed to grow a bit longer and maybe over time transitioned to native gardens, which provide better habitat and encourage more biodiversity than mowing and slashing, which we do across Hobart. And I'd like to know what the figure is for mowing and slashing. It's in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. We use both our own crews, plus we use contractors to do some of this work. But I think as a transition, moving from mowing and slashing areas that are only mowed and slashed, they're not used for much else, but converting them into garden across time would help us with our costs, would help us with our climate emissions, etc., and biodiversity values. So I'd like to keep an eye on this. And when will we see the next canopy report? Through you, Lord Mayor.
Director AB.
Through you, Lord Mayor, really we're in the council's hands. We now that we have the framework set up for the way of accurately monitoring this, we could do this in, for example, 1 year or 3 years, probably 3 years before we're likely to see any significant change.
Yeah, okay. I'd be happy with it. Not that I'll be around to read it, or I'll read it online. In 3 years' time, fine, to see what's happening. But if the trend continues, that we lose another 50 hectares of canopy in Hobart, I think we should be ringing the alarm bells, and we need to take better action. And I'm just wondering whether or not the grants program, the sustainability grants, to encourage greening initiatives on private land, that would need to be really tightly controlled, because I'd hate to think we give our grants to individual households rather than clusters or households or groups of properties rather than just one property. And how do we guarantee the maintenance of that vegetation into the future? So it could be that we hand out a sustainability grant for tree planting or vegetation planting, which I also
30 seconds.
Would also need to include understory plants. But how do you guarantee that they won't be cut down into the future? So those trees, through a grant, would need to be protected, for the future.
Okay, further discussion, Deputy Lord Mayor?
Yeah, just a question firstly, Lord Mayor. So if we want to increase the canopy cover, what are we telling our community about the correct type of plants to use for that?
Director AB?
Through you, Lord Mayor, it is proposed as part of the report that's before you that there's another body of work done which is about education for the community that needs to balance various things, including having plants that are planted in a way that's respectful of the bushfire risks around them. So we will need to be mindful of all the sorts of priorities for the council and landowners.
Yeah, thank you, because I think Councillor Posselt talked about heat islands, how important it is for the health of our community with a warming climate, a drying climate. We obviously need better tree cover, canopy cover, but also to reiterate Councillor Harvey's points, we need to be increasing biodiversity, restoring ecosystems, and also looking at that fire resistance with the impending El Nino. So whatever we can do to get the right type of planting for the public to know about that is critical when we do this.
Further discussion, Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. I have no concerns with 1 or 4 of this recommendation, but I do also agree with Councillor Harvey's concerns. I think it was around how that would be managed from a private land point of view. But reading through the report further, it did stand out to me at 5.3 about increasing regulation of trees on private residences, which is something that I would not be keen on. I would definitely want us to be using that as an absolute last resort, because, I, in principle, have concerns about regulating what people do on their own property. And I actually think that some of the things that we do around like the significant trees register actually negatively impacts on people wanting to put trees in their yard, because they're actually fearful that the tree will get so substantial that their neighbour will then list it and then they'll be stuck with that. But I do think there is a lot we can do in terms of the community education point of view, in terms of recommending of the species and the benefits from fire and wildlife, and also fire management perspective and the biodiversity, wildlife, things like that, because if we can plant the seed with the community, I don't see the need for us to allocate a budget for promoting that. I would have thought that we could do that a lot more cheaply just with our own social media and with some editorial and things like that. I would rather see the $20,000 budget go towards actually managing our trees. Arborist work's expensive. So I'd prefer to vote individually on these, but if it's still going to stay as a collective, then I'd probably need to vote against it. Thank you.
Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It's pretty obvious why our tree canopy is reducing, and that's because we're building more houses. There's more subdivisions, there's more houses. I mean, it's a challenge for this council. Here we are, you know, pushing and pushing and pushing that more houses are built, and there's justification for that. Of course, I'm not saying we don't build houses, but we should have a good hard look at ourselves and look a bit deeper when we make some of these decisions. I refer to these rates that increased on vacant lands. It was people screaming in this very chamber that it was rich people land banking and they were doing it there for profit. There was that many people who called me and said they had vacant land next to them and they were doing it for their quiet enjoyment, and they had trees on them and they had gardens and vegetable gardens were growing things on them. And it's the same with me. I've been fortunate enough in the subdivision to have a number of properties around me, and I've planted over 300 trees so far. A recent council decision to double my rates makes me now look at the whole situation, as with these other people, and selling them off and building houses. I mean, come on, we've got to get real about this, and if we want more houses and more subdivisions and all this sort of thing, and this is the net knock-on result of it. But it's a challenge we've got, and yes, we can ameliorate a lot of that by having other policies in there, but I think we've got to think long and hard before we make a lot of these decisions in the future about it. Thank you.
Further discussion? Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Like Councillor Odie, I'd be preferable to vote on this individually, purely because of item 6 of the amendment. Because otherwise, I'm quite happy with this. I think looking policies to improve our urban canopy is needed. I think it's beneficial. Just to touch on a few things that were said, one of the parts that I was mindful of and read in particular detail was the possible regulation section on page 49 and 50 of the report. And I took a different perspective on it than I think Councillor Harvey did. I'm happy to support the majority of this motion because of the wording in this. I don't think the way to accomplish what we're seeking out to accomplish in improving our urban canopy is further regulation on how private property owners use that property. I think the reason why we have those planning directives and planning rules in place is because we have and others in other levels of government have said for years now, since I was elected in 2018 and before that, that we have a distinct priority of wanting to get as many houses built as we reasonably can, and wanting to build more houses, and these initiatives were put in place to encourage houses to be built. I wouldn't be happy or supporting what's in here if it was suggesting that we did anything to further regulate that, and I'm glad that it doesn't. I'm perfectly happy, and I actually agree with much of what Councillor Harvey said about looking into our own public land where we have grass that's regularly mowed or regularly slashed, and maybe with the exception of highway roadsides, I'd be supportive of looking into ways to use them more imaginatively and creatively, and in a way that makes them more of an actual nature strip. But look, I'm happy to support this with the exception of part 6. So I'd prefer to be able to vote on it individually, so I can put that on the record. But other than that, I'm quite content with what's in this report.
So Alderman Barakis, you have already voted against 6, but it is now part of. It is now
part of the motion, so I don't want to vote for the substantive with that in there.
To re-prosecute that.
Oh, yeah. I'm not asking it to re-prosecute, but I'll just placing my preferences on the.
Okay. And Councillor Elliott, you wanted to vote separately on item 3, I think, was it?
Yes, please.
Okay. I am getting some advice from the Director of Local Government about if it's okay for us to be doing this, picking out bits and pieces. I think it's been our practice, but I just want to make sure we've got, we are doing the right thing with this process. But I will, for now, propose that we just take item 3 separately, because we have already included those other amendments and voted on them, and they're included in the substantive motion. So I'll put yes.
Sorry, Lord Mayor, just if we're voting on item 3 separately, it's probably not going to be answered, but it seems pertinent to ask what percentage of the arboriculture services budget does $20,000 represent?
Through you,
Director
Chair,
Abey.
as an indication, there is a previous council motion that $100,000 is paid towards general street trees within Hobart, so that is a relatively small component of, would be a small component of that budget. And I'll just check with Ms Wilson, but comparable to our nature strip.
Yep.
So when the council introduced the nature strip policy, it also introduced a policy that we would have a tree giveaway, so it would be on a par with that funding.
Okay, so I'll just put item 3 separately. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Say no. Show of hands, all those in favour.
That's Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Passelt, Councillor Lohberger, Alderman Bloomfield, Councillor Kelly, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Harvey, the Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor.
And against?
Alderman Barakis and Councillor Elliott. That's carried. 9-2.
Okay, and I'm now putting items 1, 2, 4, 5, 6 and 7, the rest of the substantive motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Show of hands, all those in favour.
Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Elliott, Councillor Passelt, Councillor Lohberger, Alderman Bloomfield, Councillor Kelly, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Harvey, the Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor.
And against?
Barakis.
Okay, moving on to item 14, response to petition, TasWorks transformer relocation, moved by Deputy Lord Mayor, seconded by Councillor Sherlock.
I'll speak to this motion pretty briefly, but I can understand why the Harborough Avenue residents and their supporters, or the signatories to this petition, are put out with the way that TasNetworks operates when they want to shift their substations. It has been a bugbear for this group of residents for probably over 12 months. You know, like I think I was first approached by Ms Chen, who was the sponsor of this petition over 12 months ago. They get very frustrated with these approaches. They're not the only ones, and it would be good if there were something that we can do, but I think it is out of our remit as a council, as an organisation, to be doing things, and I think that's equally frustrating for us who want to see some kind of better approach to this. So I just have one question, which is, usually or previously we've had a list of petitioners attached to the agenda, and I can't see it here. I just wonder if that's a change of practice or what's happening with that. And I'm quite happy for it not to be on a public, as part of the public agenda, but I just wonder where that is.
So the report through you, Chair, indicates that petition was tabled on the 19th of June. This report is now responding to that petition, which would have had the 36 signatures tabled.
So that would have been on the minutes of that last meeting, would it?
That would have been presented, tabled on the 19th, at the 19th of June council meeting.
Would it have been? We don't see that. So would it have been in the minutes of that 19th of June? It is? Right. Okay. All right. Well, I'll go back and check that out. So if that's the practice, then fine. I just wasn't aware of that. Thank you.
Further discussion?
I had a question through you, Chair.
Councillor Lohberger.
What would be the upshot if the council was to vote no to this recommendation, if any? I'm not sure who could answer that, but yeah.
Director Abey.
Through you, Lord Mayor, so the petition calls for the council to do various steps. We have proposed slightly different steps. If the council didn't pass that motion, then effectively there's no response to the petition.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? No. I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 15, response to petition from the Salamanca Stallholder Association, negotiation on draft licence agreement.
Moved.
Moved by Councillor Harvey, seconded by Councillor Dutta. Any discussion? Put that. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 16, independent review of Commonwealth disaster funding submission. That's to note the submission being put in. Any discussion? Moved by Councillor Harvey, seconded by Alderman Bloomfield. Any discussion on that? No, there being none, I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 17 is procurement quotation exemption report. Moved by Deputy Lord Mayor, seconded by Councillor Sherlock. Is there any discussion on the exemptions? There being none, I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 18 is governing Hobart sense check, a report from the CEO. Would you like to speak to the acting CEO? Would you like to speak to this?
Certainly. This was done in response to a request from elected members that we do a check-in at the six-month mark of the new governance framework that had been introduced in November 2022. The recommendation provides that high-level sense check, but also recognises that in order for the portfolio committees to be fully reviewed, that we recommend we allow those to have a full cycle of being implemented. So we're proposing to wait until August next year to consider that aspect of the governance model. But we recognise that in December 2023, we do need to review the delegations associated with the governance model and the aspect of the portfolio committee in relation to terms of reference. The other key feedback we've received is that we would be keen to introduce to the model an agenda briefing session to occur on a Monday before the publication of the council agenda to enable elected members to ask some high-level questions about the agenda items that have been proposed, and for officers to be able to present the findings and recommendations in an information exchange rather than a decision-making forum. So they're the key recommendations that we put to you.
Any discussion?
I'm happy to move it.
Oh, Lord sorry. Mayor. Moved by Deputy Lord Mayor, seconded by Councillor Sherlock. Alderman Barakis.
Just a question through to the acting CEO. Lord Mayor, just in regards to that last point about the agenda briefing sessions, is there a reason why we wouldn't publicise the agenda earlier for that purpose? Because I think I've had it said, and I know other elected members have had in conversation and have raised that it's having a longer lead-in time to be able to actually read the material, and also for the public to be able to read that material gives us a better opportunity to consult and all that.
It's that particular item, Alderman Barakis, is covered in a question that was taken on board from Alderman Bloomfield. Yep. So the governance officers have investigated whether that's possible, and because of the way we take particular notices of motion to be brought to the table, we actually don't have the time frame to be able to publish the agenda any earlier.
Oh, fair enough.
We have investigated that option.
Further discussion, Councillor Elliott.
I had a question just related to that one through you, Chair. Are we able to bring the deadline for the notice of motion forward? No.
It's a statutory requirement that we need to do that.
Thank you. And with another question, with that council agenda briefing session, can you tell me, would that be in business hours or overnight or?
Oh, no, we envisage that to be within the workshop program.
Right.
It's just that that particular workshop would be dedicated to the council papers and the recommendations that we would be putting.
Thank you. And this is a housekeeping thing, but just a request with the workshops, it would be great, I think, if we could have a Zoom link provided to elected members by default rather than having to ask for it. So when for a workshop, if we can have, you know, in the meeting calendar item, just the Zoom link there. Because at the moment I often have to email and ask for it and I remember late and then I'm inconveniencing someone. Yep. Just a bit of feedback. I was one of the 6 that completed the survey, and I do still, and also suggested this 6-month check-in, and I still do have concerns with the changes we have gone to. For example, unless I could be wrong, but I think it's been 6 weeks since our last council meeting, which is quite a long time, you know, given we're a capital city. And I think I read earlier on, well, in the report that items that come to council are triaged. That worries me because I don't like the thought of work in the organisation stalling or being delayed because it's waiting to go to a council meeting. You know, I could picture, for example, someone saying, oh, you know, the agenda's too full, that'll have to hold over until next month. So that is a concern of mine, that things might be not coming to council in a timely manner because of the monthly schedule we've moved to, and in particular, I think 6 weeks since the last meeting. The fortnightly planning committee meetings, I think, are often at risk of not having a quorum because the agendas are so light. So I think that's a loss in terms of, and a risk for us in terms of moving away from the fortnightly council meetings. My concerns still do remain with the time that we have to go through the extensive agendas because the agendas are large because of the less frequent meetings. With the feedback on the portfolio committees, I think it would be great. I've attended 3 of the portfolio committee meetings and the chairs managed the presence of elected members in all different ways, and I think it would be great if we could get some consistency around that. So, for example, when Alderman Barakis and I attended Councillor Dutta's portfolio committee, he kindly gave us an opportunity to speak to the group. In another session, Councillor Paseltzi acknowledged us in the room, but in the 3rd session we weren't even acknowledged, so it kind of felt a bit awkward being at a portfolio committee meeting. So I think if there could be consistency around how chairs manage that, I think that covers my notes, the agenda. Yeah, the agenda length. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Alderman Bloomfield.
I've quite liked the move to monthly. Yes, our agendas are quite complex and at times difficult. However, it actually makes us better at our job, more attentive to detail, and ensure that our meetings run well. And the fact that we will be now looking at a workshop dedicated to ensure that the way we attend to our agenda questions and items and debate also mean that the public and this council can only benefit. I feel that the portfolio committees have been quite a good success in the fact that we have all been supplied with a focus for us to say this is what we do, this is how we contribute, although we can contribute in any other way we so choose as well. I feel that overall the fact that we now have access on a regular note, if we wish, with directors, where that was not possible before, and the physical engagement that we have with the public is unseen. We have not had that, I do not believe, before. It was the first, I believe, in the last council to have roundtables at all. Now that'll be included as a part for course, plus our committees, and then of course we have these meetings that still do continue. So I can't see much of a negative at all. I think we have made a great choice, and I'm sure there'll be things that we can still improve and smooth out, as we are with looking at the agenda meetings to support additional detail. But I do think it's something important to note.
Any further discussion? I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. There is item 19 is the Save UTAS correspondence. Councillor Harvey. Any discussion? Councillor Ryberger.
Thank you, Chair. I just did want to speak on this. I'm just a little bit disappointed that we had one meeting and one meeting only for the mediation. I do note that the motion we passed in December 2022 just said that we immediately initiate a meeting with a range of stakeholders for the purpose of dealing with the elector poll and a mechanism to move forward expediently. I feel like we've done the first part of that, but not the second part. I do think we probably should at least have one more meeting to follow up on any outcomes from this mediation and see whether it indeed was successful and whether any of the sides have decided to move closer to each other. So look, I am going to propose an amendment which is simply replacing part 1, part I, with just that the Council facilitates one more mediation meeting for UTAS stakeholders to follow up on outcomes from the June 2023 meeting. I can circulate that now, if you like.
So is that instead of item 1?
Yeah, so just to replace the existing item 1I with a new 1I. And I will circulate that now.
Yep, so, and seconded by Alderman Barakis. So Council facilitates one more meeting. Any discussion on the amendment? Councillor
Yes, I'll be supporting the amendment. I think as an observer at that meeting it was constructive and I think it would be definitely worth continuing at least one more.
Any further discussion?
I attended the meeting as well, and I think that there were 3 parties there. There was the University Union, UTAS, and the Save UTAS people. The conversation was had, the debate was had. UTAS didn't see the need for more meetings. I'm just wondering why we would have more meetings. I'm happy with the recommendation the way it is. I won't support the amendment because I think that the meeting served its purpose, and I think that was enough.
Yeah, Alderman Barakis, yes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, I think the fact that UTAS didn't see the need in having further meetings kind of tells as much of the story, because I think part of the reason why we had such an issue with such huge community interest and passion was because of the feeling amongst the community that the university wasn't interested in listening to them or their concerns for right or wrong or wherever the issue lands. I think that given we had probably what was one of the larger issues or larger single issues as far as community engagement and community involvement, and an elector poll that showed an overwhelming majority of Hobart's population holding the same opinion on this issue, I think it warrants at least more than one meeting. I think regardless of where people land on this issue, this is an issue that members of the public continue to be concerned by, continue to be interested in, and if correspondence that's showing up in my inbox and I'm sure others' inboxes, and the coverage by the news media, it's still an issue that holds interest and holds concern in the community. I think it would be us doing our job and doing the intent of that previous motion justice in at least holding one meeting to follow up on this, because I don't think I think if it was up to whether or not UTAS wanted to do this, none of this would be happening. We'd still be having those secret meetings. So I'd very much be supporting this, and that's why I seconded the amendment.
Alderman Bloomfield.
If it was up to me, I'd be asking for a lot more than one meeting. However, the fact that we have the opportunity to push forward and suggest that that's a great idea is very important to me. In particular, the fact that I still feel we are dealing with very much a David and Goliath position, and even the council themselves is very much a David in this point. We haven't had a great deal of power in this, and the one thing that we can do is allow the community to be heard and allow the community to reach forward to the UTAS representatives to speak their piece and hopefully be heard. Hopefully, let's bring something where they actually start to become on the same page, because we all actually have the same community to reside and work within, and the problems really have not dissipated at all.
Okay, further, Councillor Posselt.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, I'd rise to support the amendment, which everyone will be aghast by, I'm sure. And I also rise to just provide some commentary and argument back to those who have said that UTAS are not interested in consulting. I recently attended the opening of the River's Edge build.
Point of order?
Yes.
That's not what was said. Not interested in consulting. They weren't interested in additional meeting.
Okay.
That can be corrected.
Sorry, that wasn't referring to comments by Councillor Harvey. It was referring to comments by other councillors on the other side of the debate.
It's just a different perspective, I think, Councillor Harvey, not so much a point of order.
So I recently attended the opening alongside several of my colleagues of the River's Edge building in Launceston, which is a brand new UTAS facility. And I think everybody who attended was astounded by the quality of the building and the learning space, and the way that Launceston City Council had engaged in a proactive and productive manner with the university throughout the campus transformation process in the north to get the best results for the city. And I think that there's some lessons there to be learned. But I do think that the University of Tasmania will be more than happy to meet with constituents, with ratepayers, with students, with the NTEU and TUSA, one more time to rehash what was said last year and to find out if we have moved forward in a more productive manner. I think that the university is very proactive in their communication and their consultation. Things can always be done better. But if we want the best result here, I don't see a reason why we can't facilitate one further meeting. The cost of a meeting is very low. So let's crack on, have a meeting, and let's all try to move forwards together on this item. It's happening, so let's get the best outcome we can.
Any further discussion? I'll put the amendment. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Show of hands, all those in favour.
Alderman Barakis, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Elliott, Councillor Posselt, Councillor Lohberger, Alderman Bloomfield, Councillor Kelly, Councillor Dutta, the Deputy Lord Mayor, and the Lord Mayor.
And against?
Councillor Harvey. That amendment's carried. 10-1. Sorry, 10-1.
Okay. Now, I think it's probably a good time to have a dinner break until 7:30. So I'm going to adjourn the meeting for about 18 minutes.
We almost finished.
to go back to item 19 because we only passed the amendment. We actually didn't do the substantive. Whoops. So I'll just move that the item 19 as amended.
I don't even know it was. Ah, okay.
As amended, which the amendment's up there. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no.
No.
Show of hands. All those in favour.
Membrakis, Councillor Elliott, Councillor Loberger, Alderman Bloomfield, Councillor Kelly, Councillor Dutta, Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor.
And against?
Councillor Harvey. That is carried.
Okay, item 21, receive and note. Someone move that. Moved by Deputy Lord Mayor, seconded by Alderman Bloomfield. All those in favour of receiving and noting say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Now move to item 22. It's a motion from Councillor Loberger. Would you like to move your motion, Councillor Loberger?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'm just still trying to catch up. Alrighty, so I've just brought on a climate change leadership motion just regarding transport emissions. I'm just seeking for councillors as leaders in the community to consider taking a little hit ourselves and reducing our use of fossil fuels. The reasoning for that, the overall reasoning really is that I think it's inappropriate for the organisation to be continuing to encourage us and or reward us in our usage of fossil fuels, given that climate change is moving so quickly. So I've got a little speech here. I'll do my best to get it out within the time.
Okay, sorry, is there a second of your motion?
Seconder for the motion.
Deputy Lord Mayor.
It's becoming abundantly clear that climate change is accelerating far more quickly than predicted, and the looming El Nino weather event across Tasmania and Australia will be turbocharged by this recent acceleration in the effects of climate change. Threat to Tasmania from bushfire, drought and flood has never been greater, and the need to take climate action now is pressing. But we cannot lead the community on this existential issue without demonstrating our own willingness to go first. It's incumbent on us as community leaders to set an example in our community by taking steps to voluntarily reduce and limit our own carbon emissions through our workplace. Hobart City Council currently offers a range of fossil fuel-based benefits to members which are focused on transport, but it's no longer appropriate that this continue in the way that it currently is. The physics of climate change really don't care if elected members have always received these benefits or if we appreciate the utility that these benefits provide and don't wish to give them up. The physics of climate change are affected only by the amount of our carbon emissions, nothing else. So I'll just go through the major points. Point one on the fuel allowance. The current allocation is 1,500 litres per year, which allows for a significant higher mileage than the average vehicle use in Tasmania. Despite the fact that our municipality is comparatively small and the jobs of the elected members, barring the Lord and the Deputy Mayor, are part-time roles. The Local Government Act does require that some form of travel allowance is paid, so I propose to reduce the current fuel allowance from 1,500 litres per year to 500 litres per year. I believe that's a fair reduction that still allows for significant travel within the municipality. With regards to the parking pass that allows free parking on Hobart City Council meters, elected members are already able to park for free in the CBD at the Town Hall, and this motion intends to continue that particular arrangement. The free parking pass therefore provides only a limited benefit, given that the great majority of parking meters are also in the CBD within walking distance of the Town Hall, where we already have a free parking space. While not related to climate change, there's also an equity issue involved in making a policy change that requires elected members to use the parking meters. There have been regular complaints about these meters for many years, and it's only fair that elected members start using them just like other ratepayers and residents in the city. And finally, air travel, which is really the big ticket item in this motion when it comes to reducing carbon emissions. We all like to travel, but it's clear that as a society and as a country, and indeed as a globe in many ways, we've become over-reliant on unnecessary air travel at a time when we need to be drastically reducing our carbon emissions. So this motion seeks to limit interstate and international air travel to situations where there is a compelling reason only for flying instead of using alternative options, and to ask the council the council CEO with making the ultimate decision on what is or is not compelling. With regards to our sister and friendship city relationships, there are many other ways to improve cultural ties that do not require dignitaries to fly back and forth between cities. And the motion also seeks advice directly from those sister and friendship cities about ways to improve our cultural ties without the need for regular delegations. I guess finally I'd just like to make one final point. It's almost unheard of in Tasmania for elected members at any level of government to vote to reduce their own perks. This motion does involve some sacrifice by elected members in order to demonstrate leadership on emissions reduction. So I really do hope that we can grasp the nettle here and find it in ourselves to make some or all of the sacrifices that are listed in the motion. So I commend the motion to the room, and I would ask that we can vote separately on the points because there has been some very different feedback given to me by various people around the table about the different points.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Further discussion? Alderman Bloomfield.
There is merit in what Councillor Lohberger has to say. The problem is some of the applications are going to be problematic. I note that we get, 1,500 litres a year. That's 28 litres a week, which is around about half a tank if you have an ordinary car. So if you're part-time and you're doing half a tank, it may or may not be appropriate or not, but we are kind of not looking at enormous use here. The other problem is that we're bringing this in right at the moment where we have an extraordinary reduction in bus availability, and from personal attempts at trying to use an e-scooter, I still find that I am very limited to how I can use it safely. I tend to stick to areas which are broad, which are using bike lanes and so forth. So we are in what I'd say a very early stage to make some significant changes. The interesting thing is too, is that we only just approved a brand new international relations methodology of addressing international relations. And by looking at that, we're already going to be ascertaining travel that is appropriate or not appropriate, and we'll probably be looking, I would say, at a lot of these types of things in that. So in some ways I feel that this is a little bit ahead of itself, as in perhaps if we were to readdress this once we've established the new international relations policy and got that firmed up, and we have a bus service that is actually functioning the way it's intended, I think we could actually therefore bring this. So rather than say no, I'd rather just say, can we just defer it until we've got an opportunity to actually make good? The last point that I'd like to make too is that the one thing that I was really surprised about by being an elected member in this room is that it's actually quite costly to be here. Most of us would have other sources of income because we need it. These days, a family can't be raised on anything less than about 60, like it or not. And if you are under that value, you're not doing well and you are struggling. That's not something I'm making fun of. It's simply, I see what people have to do to get by, and it's harsh. So we're not on a good income. And anyone who wanted to reach up and come into this room, I would like to think it's available to anyone. So I'm not thinking in terms of today, this room will be fine, but the next elective room, I'd like to think that we leave something there for them. So we need to be present for those who possibly will be coming through on not a great deal of money. Maybe they'll be able to get through of all the things that we need to do to get elected, but we need to make sure that these types of values of money and allowances and so forth actually allows someone who doesn't have the support that any of us enjoy to actually also do a great job and actually serve the council.
Further discussion? Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. I have no problem with point 4, although I would have around the compelling reason.
3.
Oh, sorry.
Yep, I didn't
3.
know them very well.
Around air travel, yes. I support making sure that air travel only happens when it's compelling, but then that said, I would have thought that we would only do air travel now anyway when it's compelling, so I'm not sure if it might be just status quo in that regard, but it's always good having a recheck of where our positioning is on it. I also appreciate the intent around reducing emissions, but I'm not sure that this actually will do that. All it does is reduce the fuel allowance, but that doesn't mean we're actually driving less. It just means we have a lower fuel allowance. We'll still be driving just as much, but just with less of an allowance. Parking on the deck, I actually think it could have the opposite effect, because I do use the on-street parking, and I think if I'm meeting with a community member or a business owner, I will park at a location close to them. So instead, I'll find myself driving extra to the parking deck and then, yes, walking, but I've driven further, if that makes sense. So it's actually increasing emissions. And like along the same lines as Alderman Bloomfield, it's a very busy role if you're going to be a councillor, if you want to do it, fully and give it your role. And there's some practicality reasons, like I do have my, 3 and 7-year-old apprentices sometimes accompany me on meetings, and I can't take them on scooters and things like that. I am really conscious of making sure that we're not giving ourselves excessive benefits. So if it was more along that argument, then I would be would make sense. I'm basically careless around really reducing the fuel limit. I haven't claimed anything and actually don't really intend to, because I don't think it's significant. The parking, I think, is more valuable for me from getting out there and being in the community and being a representative. I think that's something that would make sense to hold on to. And people come up to me and talk to me all the time around what's happening in their community, just by being out there and being seen. So I can appreciate the intent to reduce emissions, and if there was other ways to go about that, I'd be very open to them. I'm just not sure that this is it. Thank you.
For the discussion?
I have a question through you, Lord Mayor. I just wanted to know how many cars do we have here at the council? How many cars or fleet of cars do we have? And how many are fuel and how many are electric?
We'll have to take that question on notice, I'm afraid.
Thank you.
Councillor.
Okay.
Alderman Brackus.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, I'd like to echo the comments by both Councillor Elliott and Alderman Bloomfield. I think, and I appreciate the intent of this motion, I do know that in regards to the 1,500 and 500 litres per year, this was, I think it was a motion by Councillor Harvey. Can't remember when. I was trying to look it up. I could be wrong. I'm not trying to put words in anyone's mouth. But there was the 1,500 litres. It might be a question through you. The 1,500 litres was determined or was guided by an average use. Was it not? It wasn't an arbitrary amount. I'm not sure who the right person to ask that from is. Lord Mayor.
I recall that it was based on average use of a vehicle, Australian average use of a vehicle.
Yeah, look,
Quite a few years ago, but I recall it was based on that.
if the motion was to reassess what the average, I think to arbitrarily reduce it, I think risks us not complying with the Act, for one. I think at the end of the day, as has been said, we all have responsibilities in our roles to drive around, and whilst we could do it other ways as far as how we reimburse that, that does speak to the next the next item as far as the parking reimbursements. With the exception of the Lord Mayor, we all have other jobs, or the majority of us have other jobs, and unlike other levels of government, we don't have staff to do our admin for us. So not only are we reimbursed financially at a lower level to other levels of Parliament, other levels of government, sorry, but we are also time poor because we do have other jobs, other responsibilities, and going through and logbooking every single little trip that we take for the purposes of claiming a litre and a half worth of fuel to go visit this person, do a site visit for a DA or to attend the function or whatever have you, log the receipts of which parking meter usages we were for work or were not for work. We are adding to an administrative burden, not just for us and a reduced capacity for us to focus on actually doing our jobs, but also an administrative burden on whoever it is that's going to sit on the other side of that desk and process all these reimbursement applications. And I think when it all comes out in the wash, I don't think that we're actually providing a cost benefit to the ratepayer, and I don't think it's doing anything to make us more effective at our jobs. I think given that we are, moving towards and trying to push other modes of transport, I wouldn't be opposed to us looking at ways to reimburse or proactively cover other forms of transport as a way to get around. I don't think that the city's ready as far as mobility options for us to be able to practically do our jobs without access to a car and use of a car. And I think we'd need to be very careful in setting these remunerations and these allowances in a way that doesn't fall us foul of the Act. So they're my two biggest concerns. As for Part C of Part 3, I'm actually not too worried about that. I'm glad that Councillor Pesalt offered to vote for these separately because Part 3 was the one that I think most people might have, or I have some issues with. I have no issue with Part C. I think we should only be travelling and we should only be flying out of the state when it's necessary. I think when we can do things via Zoom as effectively as being there in person, we should. That's for environmental reasons. It's also for, I think, responsible use of ratepayer money. So I'd support that. The rest of it I'm happy with or basically careless about. I think it's otherwise a good motion. I just have an issue with Part 3A and B. I'd be urging other elected members to vote against that part. I think there's probably a more well planned out way that we could go about assessing or reassessing our what are appropriate entitlements for us to get around and do our jobs as far as travelling around the city. But the rest of it I'm okay with.
Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to make some introductory comments, and it's my understanding that the previous councillors made this decision with regards to fuel car parking and debated it for quite some time, because I read the article in the paper when people were using their own personal credit card. It was an imposition on the staff to do all the administrative work, as Alderman Barak has stated. So I think it's going to be the same thing. It's going to create a lot more work in order to do that. The other introductory point that I want to make is that sometimes when we are campaigning and we are not in council, we make these statements, as it were, that we don't want this, we'll do that. But when you come in as an elected member, it becomes a different story. We realize, how difficult it is, how time-consuming it is if you want to do your work properly. You've got to read, you've got to make sure you attend the meetings, you make sure you are available to people, you go site visits, etc., etc. Now, having made those introductory comments, I just want to pick on a few things because I'm sure others will talk about other things. The fuel thing is not going to in any way reduce carbon, as we're talking about, has already been stated. If you look at the statements made, and especially when you look at the administrative comments, it is interesting to say that there is an assumption is made, assuming the average cost is $2, incurred $1,500, and we would be able to spend $36,000. Now, here is an assumption we're making, okay, that this might happen. Let's look at the reality. Let's look at the evidence and the facts. And for us to make decisions, it needs to be based on facts. Now, 2022 financial year, the record as evidence states this. Total fuel cost for the elected members was only $15,767. The total litres used wasn't that times 12 gives you whatever it is, but the total amount of litres used was only 9,086.27. The average litres used for elected members, each elected member on average used only 757 litres. Now if you look at the facts and then looking at the assumptions we are making, facts is what guides our decision. So I'm saying that each one of us, if you're given that amount, $1,500 litres, some elected members don't even use it. Some elected members only use 500 or less than that, because it's a personal choice we make. We're not going to be micromanaged, as it were, by these policies. We make that decision because we know the effects of climate change and what we've got to do. Not only that, I think the other important point for me is this, that during COVID, and even during election time, some of us did not take the allowance. During COVID time, I know for sure there were 2 or 3 elected members who gave the allowance to others who were in need. So we make the decision all the time when we are able to make the judgment ourselves. So I think this is only an allowance given to us, and it's really peanuts, in the scheme of things. And if this benefit is given to you, and I'm sure all of us will use the judgment and do the right thing, because we are professional, in our role, in our capacity, hopefully, and we will do the right thing. And if we do the wrong thing, then I'm sure we will be judged by it. So my suggestion and my argument for this is based on evidence. If you look at the evidence, time doesn't allow me to go through each motion in there, each element, but just one that I picked to set an example, and I could go each one of them and present the evidence, and it will be quite contrary to the assumptions we're making. Thank you.
Further discussion? Councillor Harvey.
Well, Mayor, the thing that affects me most about this motion from Councillor Lohberger is part 2, and that's climate change. That's the thing that affects me the most. The fuel bill has no effect on me because I haven't collected any, I haven't charged the council or collected any fuel from the council for I don't know how many years. Parking permit is very convenient, but I'm prepared to sacrifice that if it makes a difference. And I guess sacrifice is the word here. And I think about this regularly when it comes to climate change. There's a climate emergency and the world is in, terrible trouble, and people are still carrying on like it's, nothing's changed. So at what point do people start to realise we all need to make sacrifices? And even the point with regard to flying, I've cut back my flying. I go interstate for meetings 2, maybe 3 times a year, and that's it. I don't go overseas anymore. It's my personal choice not to do that. I won't be going off on any sister city excursions. So this doesn't affect me. Like I said, the only thing that does is climate change. And what's happening around the world, we see on the news every night, the fires in Canada, biggest fires ever, Greece, Turkey, our turn's coming again. So they're the things that really affect me. And from my own carbon perspective, I've already banked 30 tonnes of carbon in the last 18 months, so I'm in credit, to be honest. 7 tonnes in the last 2 months I've banked of carbon, so I'm well ahead of the curve there. So I'm happy to, see this pass, because I think climate change is the compelling issue that we all need to make sacrifices for. So happy to support the motion.
Further discussion? Councillor Posselt.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Lohberger for bringing this motion. It allows me to talk about a bunch of things which are of interest to me. I think that one of the issues here is, fundamental issues in question here is equity, which is, again, something that I'm very interested in across every aspect of life. see, some elected members here live in the CBD proper and are saying they're happy to give up their parking and their fuel allowance. Bit disingenuous. Other members, because of the rules of local government here in Tasmania, other elected members live 50 kilometres from the CBD and travel in for all of their council business. Now, I don't set the rules for who can stand for government, for council. However, given those rules are set, it would be awfully unfair for the person living in the CBD to remove the allowances that they don't access from the person who is coming from 50 kilometres away. It doesn't seem very fair to me. So I think that encouraging people from all walks of life to have a go at council, that's what we want. We want community representation at this table. And at the moment, it's not a very well remunerated position. And you know, doing some basic sums, and it's great that I get the opportunity to talk about this publicly, but doing some sums, we are on, if you're doing the job properly, we are on borderline minimum wage, minimum federal wage. Now, I'm not really into martyrdom. It's not really my thing. And I think that politicians around this state and around this table are very hesitant to say, you know what, we should be paid more, because it's not popular. And people say, oh, well, you're making, you know, some interesting people out there say, oh, well, you're making, you know, millions of dollars as a cut from the stadium. Well, I can tell you I'm not. And some of these narratives in the community that we're really well paid are just false. And a problem with that is that it doesn't empower the people that we need around this table to be here, because it doesn't pay a wage high enough to put food on the table. And the reason why that's important and relevant to this motion is that any change to parking or to fuel allowances is degradation of the already incredibly poor remuneration for this position. And another element that I'm really excited to talk about, which this brings up, is what constitutes council work. Now, a proposal in here is that we use Easy Park and then we seek reimbursement for that park when, or that parking fee, when we're undergoing council work. What is council work? What does that mean? And I think each elected member probably has their own compass on that. But for me, the single most important element of our job is being in the community. So if we have access to be able to park without cost in the city and observe how people interact with the built environment, how people interact with street dining trials, how people interact and traffic is affected by scramble crossing trials, that's all part of our job, and it's really, really important. Way more important than me meeting with Andrew Wilkie. Sorry, Andrew. I do really like the work you do, but it is. Being in our community is the most important thing that we do. And so I think that this motion, while it's really well intentioned, just doesn't hit a few of the really key items for me and does the opposite for what I would like to see us do as a council. With that said, like many of the councillors around the table to this evening, I do support that we have a higher level of scrutiny for interstate and international flights. And I think it's probably appropriate, because I don't think anyone has actually asked the CEO the question, but what is the filter, what's the scrutiny that we apply for air travel within the council, if it's an officer or indeed a councillor?
There is a level of scrutiny that is applied. It's not an automatic response based on a request. So there is a judgment that's required around the need for that to be face-to-face and the need for direct networking or information exchange or training or whatever it is that a staff member attends. But we are more and more moving to online engagement for conferences and networking and meetings online. But there is still a requirement for international and national travel, but we're very conscious about how we decide on that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, CEO. Look, we've already shown tonight that I'm willing to put in extra strengthening elements to existing policies, and so I support Councillor Lohberger's request that we actually formalise that as part of a motion and do provide a high level of scrutiny to flights. And as far as the rest of the motion, I think that's the only element that I can support within the motion. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you to Councillor Lohberger for the concept of this motion. I would like to suggest, based on some of the discussions already had, a couple of amendments, that 1 and 2 stay as is, but part 3A is struck out, partly because of the equity issues which have already been raised by Alderman Bloomfield and Councillor Passelt. It's not only an equity about who can and can't participate, and we've already had an elected member in the last term who lived, certainly at least one who lived outside of the local government area, who had to rely on driving back and forth. But it also, there's another equity side to this. At the moment, hybrids and e-vehicles are accessible only to those who can afford them, and so those people who rely on petrol cars would also most likely to be covered by the equity issue. So I suggest that perhaps Councillor Lohberger might discount part A, 3A of that motion. I agree with part 3B. I think it's Easy Park is relatively easy to use, and we should be using it. And I'm not sure about that limit of $500 per year, but I'm happy to run with that to trial and perhaps bring that back. I'd like to think that Part 3C could remain, except that the decision to be determined by the CEO officer, the CEO or their delegate. I suggest that that be struck out. I don't think that we should change the way that we are considering these things presently. I think it comes to the Lord Mayor. Is that not right? Or does that change? Oh, so there's no change to that.
Staff, the discretion is at the CEO level.
Right.
But for elected members, the Lord Mayor does have a decision to make.
Right.
I haven't done any travel that's happened this year. I think it's going to I think it's now gone to Director Reynolds.
Can we have some clarification on that, please?
I'll stand to be corrected on that, yeah.
Sorry, I'd have to seek your advice on that, Lord Mayor.
Oh, just the most recent conferences that elected members went on interstate. I didn't approve, like they're not coming through to me, no.
So
we made that
task
change.
has now been delegated to myself.
Okay, so that doesn't really change okay, so so part 3C to be retained. I query whether we can look at investigating effective carbon offsets. I mean, whether that could be added into that component as well. It's probably been covered by our climate change policy development. I'm not sure. Perhaps could somebody also provide me with that information through you, Lord Mayor?
So do we require flights are offset, flights that we purchase at City of Hobart, or does our travel agent bill us for that?
I can advise that through our climate change strategy that we're developing, we're exploring whether that is in fact an effective strategy.
Yeah.
So we haven't introduced it yet, but we're investigating whether we should.
Okay, thank you. In relation to part 4, so it's the Lord Mayor rights to all Hobart sister and friendship cities. Again, I think a lot of this has been covered. I know that the value of travel cannot be underestimated. So the experience that you might have in a place is something second to none. You know, you're absorbed by a different culture. You learn different things. Alderman Bloomfield and I went up to Brisbane to have a look at some of their city shaping and urban design things that you can't have that sort of experience without actually being there. And I'd like to just quote Mark Twain, and I think it's quite relevant to us in this chamber. Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry and narrow-mindedness, and many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. So I think, you know, like there's some benefit to think about the benefits of travel, not only to us as elected members, but also to communities. And I would be fearful that is lost. And we all make choices, as Councillor Harvey has said, reducing our own travel, but determining what is beneficial in that, you know, beneficial for the city and those who live in it or who we communicate with, I think is something that we should still continue to do. So there are parts of this which I would support, but others which I find is probably somewhat, it's almost in a, I don't know that Councillor Lohberger means it to be, but it's a somewhat punitive approach, and I don't know that that's necessarily helpful to the issue of climate change.
Any further discussion?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think it's a very noble motion that Councillor Lohberger has put forward tonight. However, the way I look at this whole remuneration is the whole of package, whether it's made up of fuel, phone, and a few other things, apart from the international travel, which I totally agree with Councillor Lohberger on that point. So whether it's $40,000 allowance we get, plus this, it comes to whatever, and as Councillor Posselt said, I think it's just grossly, you can make grossly underpaid. You could make more money working behind a bar pulling beers for a few nights of the week. And for our responsibility, you know, it's the old story. I remember it being said, and this debate's been going on for years. I remember someone on council saying about 25 years ago, you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. And that old adage, it probably doesn't sound too appropriate, but you know, what's fit and proper now, we might debate this. Next generation, or not next generation, next term of EMs might be totally different. We don't know what sort of people they might be, their backgrounds and all that. It's not quite that easy, and I just think we'll be going down this road every 2 or 3 years trying to rejig, fine-tune it, and do all that. My suggestion would be, and it's not for us to discuss now, is that forget all the allowances and all that, and you just have a set amount of money, and that's it. It would save all the administration costs, all the hoo-ha, whether you're using fuel or electric, and all of this other sort of stuff, and just look at that amount. If people are really concerned about not morally getting it, something that we don't deserve, you don't have to take it, and you can also donate the money away, as some people do. So, as well-intentioned it is, I just think it's a bit clunky, and we're just setting ourselves up for more policy interpretation, debate, and all that sort of stuff. So I will support some of what Councillor Lohberger mentions, but I just don't think it's all that practical for the rest of it. I totally agree with Councillor Burnett's too, that I think it's imperative that people do travel and go and see some of these conferences. The value I got from going to Sydney to the nighttime economy, it was just fantastic, and I think it'd be remiss of people not to take that seriously and get away and do that. So they're my comments, and I'll be voting accordingly. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Would you like to sum up, Councillor Lohberger?
Thank you, Chair. Look, that's been a great debate. Thank you to everyone in the room. I do take your points particularly about the petrol allowance. I do think really, due to issues outside of our control, especially the failure of the bus system, The point 3A is probably somewhat unviable. I do accept that. And Deputy Mayor, I'm happy if Councillor Dutta is happy to accept your amendment suggestion that we just delete that particular. Did you second it? Who seconded it? Was it you? Was it you?
I think it was me.
Well, I guess if you're happy to remove that,
Yeah,
then
yeah,
let's
yeah,
remove
sure.
3A. It has no chance of getting up, clearly. But I do believe, as I mentioned during my initial speech, flights are the big ticket item here. We're looking at reducing emissions, and there does seem to be quite some support around the table. So we'll see how we go with parking permit, but I really would urge everybody in the room, if they can, to vote in the positive for part 3C. I think that'll do me, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, I'll vote. I'll put those one by one then. Is that what you were looking for,
Well,
Councillor?
I guess 1 and 2 are the same, aren't they, really?
Okay.
And probably...
All those,
yeah.
all those in favour of items 1 and 2, say aye. Against, say no. Carried unanimously. Item 3B, you're not doing 3A, Councillor Lohberger? No. Item 3B, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against, say no.
Aye.
Show of hands, all those in favour?
That's Councillor Lohberger, Councillor Harvey, the Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor.
And against?
Barakis, Councillor Elliott, Councillor Passelt, Councillor Kelly, Councillor Dutta.
Sorry, I wanted to vote in favour, but I missed it. Sorry.
Sorry, we can
No.
All those in favour of 3B say aye.
Aye.
Oh, sorry, raise your hand.
Councillor Lohberger, Alderman Bloomfield, Councillor Harvey, the Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor.
And against?
Alderman Barakis, Councillor Elliott, Councillor Passelt, Councillor Kelly and Councillor Dutta. It's 5 all, therefore that's not carried.
3C.
Can I just have some clarification? Aren't we doing that already, pretty much?
Yes, sort of. But I guess it's more specifically.
Okay.
Yep. It's not just identified on cost, maybe it's on the climate side of things, I don't know. How would you see it as?
Not sure what the question is, sorry, Chair.
Okay, we'll just vote on it, I think. It was just a misunderstanding about whether 3C was already happening as, like, in terms of what the CEO does currently.
That was just the final sentence, wasn't it?
No, it's the whole thing. Aren't we doing that anyway?
Sorry, Lord Mayor, I'm not sure if it's a point of order. Is it proper to continue debate after we've started voting on?
No, we're just seeking clarification on. Oh yeah, I guess so. It's more questions, but yeah. Okay, item 3C. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 4, A, B and C. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Okie dokie. Moving on to another motion from Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll put the motion as listed there. It's number 23.
Second by Alderman Barakis.
Thank you. So this motion, the first part is about us making sure that we're all aware, given our governance responsibility, of that report put out by the Integrity Commission. The second part asks the Council to have the talent acquisition policy and procedure updated with a focus on strengthening parameters around direct appointments and also reviewing our conflict of interest management strategies. And the final part talks about having the policy published on the website and any other HR-related policies, work health safety, unless there's a reasonable reason to not do so. I'll address the admin response part first. The response from the officers is that this isn't in the scope of the council, and I do disagree on that. The reason being that, in my mind, it is in the council's jurisdiction, as under the Act we, as a collective, have a responsibility for determining and monitoring the application of policies, plans and programs, when, in this case, when they relate to the fair and equitable treatment of employees of the council. And in my mind, it's clear that having, when it comes to direct appointments, the ability for employees and prospective employees and the community more broadly to compete for roles in the council is highly relevant to their fair and equitable treatment. So the reason this motion came about, as the council would be aware, I asked a question back in March around the number of direct appointments, and we had a workshop on the numbers, and it was recognised that we have had, to quote the former CEO, an unprecedentedly large number of direct appointments over the past 2 years, 27 appointments, with 12 of those being from external to the organisation. 9 of those were for senior management roles or executive appointment roles. And I mean, with a HR background, this is a really large number of appointments to have brought in with no competitive recruitment process. So a director selection obviously being still meant to be based on merit, but no competition required. And as the Integrity Commission points out, there's a risk of direct appointments that they can be overused, and it can result in nepotism, cronyism and favouritism, and that can have a really bad impact on our workplace culture and morale. It can mean that employees can be overlooked and feel sideswiped if they see externals come in. And it can also mean that we are not doing what we can. We don't have assurance that we are getting the best people for the job if we aren't running a competitive process. So I'll just quote from the Integrity Commission's report. Direct appointments have inherent integrity risks. At best, they can appear to undermine the merit principle. At worst, they can facilitate cronyism and nepotism. Direct appointments can be misused to favour an individual more easily than an open recruitment process. Councils that make direct appointments should have policies and procedures in place to guard against inherent misconduct risks and ensure that employees and the public have trust in recruitment processes. So the reason I brought this to us is because at the moment the principles around direct appointments are really loose. The rationale that was given by the former CEO was that it was part of a talent acquisition process and it was a competitive labour environment. And from my perspective, I'm not comfortable with that from a governance perspective, because it could be always argued that it's a competitive labour environment. And I think it is our role as a governing body, and especially off the back of the Integrity Commission's report, that we take a closer look at our policy around this, especially given the unprecedentedly high use of direct appointments we've had in the past 2 years. The last part around making the policies available on the website is just really from the perspective of maximum transparency. I don't want anything out there that is sensitive or anything like that, but unless there's a real genuine reason why a policy should not be public, I think it should be. It helps from the perspective of attraction of new staff. People can see how we govern our organisation. They can see the different ways that different topics are managed in the organisation. And the Integrity Commission also report has at the end there a matrix that maps out all of the different councils that are across the state, and it populated what policies they do have available publicly, and several do have publicly available recruitment policies.
Sorry, I missed the 30-second thing, so you've got about 15 seconds left.
Okay. And from the councils that I have looked at, of which there are about 6 or 7, other councils do have a publicly available recruitment policy, and other councils are voting on this policy. Thank you.
Further discussion? Alderman Bloomfield.
It's a little bit unfair to highlight the number of direct employment positions simply because in the last 2 years, particularly the last 2 years, we had unprecedented staff restructure. The CEO at the time had picked up the organisation, interviewed, I believe, almost every individual in this organisation, worked out a better structure, got it done, And that is going to need to be a little bit different to just doing the standard, let's go send it out to the public, bring it back and do all the things. You don't have that time, not with the amount of people that had to be addressed by one CEO. And in fact, I do believe that this is operational. It's not actually part of our purview. And that in fact, bringing this to this room undermines the very role of the CEO. That in itself creates poor morale as a result. I have staff myself and I don't sit there going, this is how you press the enter key. I actually allow them to have authority over elements of which they are responsible. The CEO is responsible for the recruitment and all the rest of those things to do with that. We simply look after the vision and the way this organisation goes forward. If there are issues with employment, it goes to risk and audit. And risk and audit, which has an exemplary number of people in that room who are incredibly well educated and experienced in these matters, have not picked up any particular issue with these issues. So I honestly feel that this should simply be put and we move on.
Further discussion?
Is that a procedural motion?
Oh. No, I think...
Discussion to continue.
Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, just in regards to the nature of this being an operational issue, because I think that's fundamentally the crux of it. Section 28 of the Local Government Act speaks about the functions of councillors. Part 2 says, the councillors of a council collectively have the following functions. Part B, to determine and monitor the applications of policies, plans and programs for the effective and efficient provision of services and facilities, efficient and effective management of assets, and the fair and equitable treatment of employees of the council. Part C says to facilitate and encourage planning and development of the municipal area in the best interests of the community. Continuing down. And to determine and review the council's resource allocation and expenditure activities and to monitor the manner in which services are provided at council. Lord Mayor, I think this motion speaks directly to our responsibilities under this part of the Act, particularly Part 2. It'd be a different case as well if this was a matter that, I heard that there was a couple of direct appointments. I think this is an issue. Let's use it as an opportunity to make a political issue or whatever have you. But when the Integrity Commission writes an entire report saying that the nature of direct appointments in local government in Tasmania is an issue of concern, I think it's something that's worthy of us to, at the very least, look into. I don't think it needs to be interpreted as being a attack on governance or a meddling in operational affairs. This chamber determines policies and the organisation operates according to policies. When elected members try and involve themselves in the manner in which those policies are carried out, that's when we're meddling in operational affairs. Our job is to develop policies. That's what this motion is seeking to start the process for. It's not asking for even particular policy outcomes. It's just saying that we update and return to council a policy on this issue. I think, given the Integrity Commission itself raised some serious concerns, I think it would be just plain responsible governance for us to consider and look into this matter. I'd be encouraging everyone here to support this. I think it is objectively in line with what our responsibilities are and what our duties are under Section 28 of the Local Government Act. So we need to park this operational versus policy issue, because we're talking about developing a policy that is completely and entirely within the realms of what not just our powers are. It's not about powers, it's what our duties are under the Local Government Act. It's what we were elected to do. And if there's an issue about, or there's concerns raised by members of the public or raised by the Integrity Commission, that a high number of direct appointments means that we aren't hiring the best people, or that there's other issues, other risks of issues like cronyism or anything like that. It's not about us looking to find if someone's done the wrong thing, but it's a matter of us wanting to making sure that we develop policies that the public can have faith that we're operating under the best governance policies, and that our workforce and our employees, our staff, and people that might be wanting to apply for jobs know that they're going to get fairly treated if they are to apply for those jobs. So I think it's something that we need to be looking into, and I don't think it should be interpreted as anything other than us wanting to look into policies to improve our governance on council.
Questions, do I ask? I just had two questions. How many policies exist in the Hobart City Council to run this organisation? And of those policies, how many there are, how many do we actually here in council actually personally address?
I don't have the exact number. The majority of council's policies come through the chamber. The operational policies relating to human resources, remuneration, recruitment are made by the CEO through delegation, but the majority of other policies do come through this chamber and are endorsed by council.
Thanks, Mayor. Have been reading through the Local Government Workforce Skills and Capability Survey, the national report from 2022. And I'm just going to read through some of it. Looking at the numbers of employees by level of government provided by Another Perspective on the issue, between 2012 and 2021, total employment numbers in local government barely changed, but on a per capita basis, employment in local government actually fell. So the services have been maintained, but the number of workers in the workforce in local government fell by 11% in that 10-year period. And some of the key findings in the research is that local government continues to experience skill shortages in multiple occupations, exacerbated by the impacts of COVID, the impacts of climate change, and the accelerated take-up of technology and digitisation of services. Local government are grappling with significant challenges in relation to recruitment and retention of skilled staff, and accessing training opportunities to enhance workforce skills and capabilities. Employee attrition and an ageing workforce are ongoing and an escalating difficulty. Local governments are having difficulties in securing the right quantum and mix of skills to support local services provisions, which is affecting not only local government productivity but also the productivity of host localities and regions. Barriers to effective workforce planning and management include a shortage of resources within local government, a lack of skilled workers, and a loss of corporate knowledge as employees retire or resign. So this is a bit of a crisis in local government. There's not enough people to fill vacancies across the whole sector. So of course, direct appointments, I think, play an important role in finding the right people to fill important roles in local government. No point advertising positions if there's just not the capable staff out there to fill these roles. So I think direct appointments play a role. And looking at the Integrity Commission report also, it didn't say you can't have direct appointments. It said you need to ensure that policy and procedures are in place to manage those direct appointments. And I'm going to ask through you, Lord Mayor, do we have appropriate policies and procedures in place to manage direct appointments? It's a rhetorical question because it's in the response anyway, that we do have those policies and procedures that help us manage direct appointments. And I also agree with others who said this is an operational issue. The council doesn't employ the staff. The council employs the CEO, and the CEO is responsible for staffing within the organisation. So I don't see this as a governance issue for us. I see this as an issue for the CEO and the recruiting, capacity within the organisation. So I'm not going to support the motion tonight because I don't think we need to, that this is operational and that the staff and the CEO do their best to fill positions within council using, the available policies and procedures to do so.
Councillor Posselt.
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Look, the mover of the motion and I have had our differences, but that shouldn't come into my decision to vote for or against what is being put forward. As I've displayed so far in my term on council, I am a big supporter of transparency and accountability. And all this motion does, really, is provide a little more transparency around how we acquire people when a direct appointment is required. And I have no problems with direct appointments. Direct appointments are appropriate and required as part of running this organisation. And having a little bit of elected member scrutiny over the policy that governs that shouldn't really be controversial or problematic for anyone in this room. I think that many of the workforce shortages that Councillor Harvey has pointed out are even more amplified in Tasmania with some of the challenges we have around housing and transport and cost of living. So we do definitely need to continue on with direct appointments, and I strongly support that. But I will support this motion because it does merely give it that little edge of transparency. And to be respectful, I have always run the argument when it comes to anything put in front of me in this council that I'm not an expert in the field and I will defer to experts. And in this particular instance, Councillor Elliott is an expert in the field. So I have to recognise that to be true to myself. So I will support this policy, and I look forward to seeing it brought back to us for endorsement in the coming future.
Deputy Lord Mayor.
Yeah, a couple of questions first, Lord Mayor, thank you. If I may, through you. How many employees does the City of Hobart have? Roughly, I don't... Yeah.
I defer to the Director of City Enablers for that answer.
Thank you, through you, Lord Mayor. There's approximately 650 employees.
All right, and perhaps the Director of City Enablers could tell us how many, what's 24 over 650?
Should do it in your
head. I mean, the point is, Lord Mayor, you don't really have to answer that, but the point is that 24 out of 650 employees is a pretty small amount for direct appointments. Another question, is the City of Hobart being investigated by the Integrity Commission in relation to this matter?
A question that we can answer. If we were being investigated, that would be confidential investigations.
Okay, all right, so we would know about it probably though. Look, I take a completely different view from Councillor Posselt. I think Councillor Posselt might have been lulled into agreeing with this motion. I see it as extreme interference in a very extreme way. It's extremely undermining of this organisation, and it's about chipping away at this organisation. That's where it seems to me that this what this motion is doing. I'm not going to support it. There is no way that I would support such a motion, and to think that this is done with the clear intention of improving the arrangement for what is an operational matter is really something that I find quite disingenuous. So I'll make no bones about it. I am not in support of this motion and this kind of level of interference, which is obviously an operational matter.
Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. We've got a planning scheme that says you've got to put an application in, it's got to be advertised. People have the right to respond to that, and then ultimately object if you want to. We've got a procurement system where you've got a tender for jobs, publicly advertise for them. We've got elected members who have to stand up, put their names forward, be scrutinised by the public and be formally elected under a very tight electoral system. Right, what's the big deal here? Yeah, sure, it might take another couple of months, but a well-organised management system and structure knows in advance what recruitment's required. There's nothing politically motivated with this motion. It's just following good business practice. I mean, even in private enterprise, you know, you want to get the best people, you advertise. I'm not trying to drag rake over the coals of the past. There might have been some urgency in doing that, but moving forward, and tonight all I hear is, you know, we've got to be open and transparent about all these other things, yet we can appoint these very, very highly paid people, I'm not saying they don't deserve that either, to extremely important positions, and for the sake, another couple of months maximum, what is the big deal here? You know, for all those other reasons we're accountable, we should be in this very instance as well. Thank you.
Further discussion? Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Chair. I am torn in this particular issue, but I will have to make a decision, and my decision is based on the following. As I read Section 28 of the Act, it is my interpretation that we can make policies. As I read Section 63, the General Manager of a council can appoint persons as employees of the council. The distinction for me here is this, that it is not a matter of appointing, it is a matter of policy. For me, that's the first point of difference. And I don't usually support and go along with everything Councillor Elliott says, but in this point here, I see merit in this, because she's arguing not for a direct appointment, but simply saying that under Section 63, the CEO has that power. Under Section 28, we have the power to make policy decisions. Point number one. Point number two is this, that the CEO is the operations manager. The CEO is the only person that the council appoints. And therefore, from then on, the CEO appoints, directs, recruits, etc., etc. We don't intermingle with that, and it becomes an operational matter. But tonight, I am interpreting this as a policy for the purposes of transparency and accountability. And the final point that I want to make here is this, that I am confident that all what this motion is asking for is to have this on record so that we, the public, our community, are able to see that we are not scared of anything. We are doing the right thing. And if we are doing the right thing, then we have no worries about this. And that's my take on these two sections that I read. And it's not based on my feelings, my biasness, but reading 28 and 63, that's my interpretation. Thank you.
Further discussion? Yeah, I've listened to the debate. I actually have no problem with us having a sort of, employment and recruitment policy at the very high level, which I think is what our policies are meant to be about, the sort of principles. So things like, some of the things around merit, aiming for merit-based, aiming for certain things, not discriminating, at the very high level. It's clear that there are some councils that have these kind of policies, a very high level policy, like 2 pages, really not drilling down at all. Like Burnie and Devonport both have something similar, very high level, 2 pages. So I don't have a problem with some of those general principles. What I have a problem with is this part 3, where it goes into all other human resources and workplace health and safety related policies be published in the council public website. Now, I think some of that stuff is overkill from what I've seen. Most other councils I've seen have that sort of, where the council, like in terms of council policies, where the council, we're setting that big picture policy on fair employment recruitment principles, but then getting down to sort of every every single employee-related policy that the CEO, the operationalising of it, I think having that on our website would be quite unusual from what I can see. I haven't seen any other city go down to that level. So I would not support 3, and I think that, you know, I think we should, if we're going to do that, I would really strongly recommend that we seek further advice on that before we agree to that. But I'm happy to sort of, for the staff to come back with a sort of big picture, elected member setting those sort of general principles, whether that's talent acquisition or whether that's a part of a general employment and recruitment principles policy that's got things like anti-discrimination and those kind of things. You know, that's what I would, that's what I'd hope would come back rather than sort of drilling down on one little bit of the employment thing. But I would like to sort of move the 3 items separately because I really think that is, you know, all other human resources and workplace health and safety related policies for our employees all on the website. I just think it's really not, again, I can't see a council that really does that. You know, at the capital city level, these, generally speaking, this is unusual. So there is something, there's a few Tasmanian councils, not all of them. Launceston and Clarence don't seem to have anything. City of Melbourne, City of Sydney, all of the other capital cities, they have a policy on the recruitment of the CEO because that's kind of the job of the council. And then there's an expectation the CEO has to comply with the law. So that's what other capital cities do. So yeah, swings and roundabout, I think, but I'm happy to do a bit, but I think some of this has gone a bit too, is going a little bit further than I think is kind of normal practice for council. So that's what I'll do. Councillor Dutta.
Chair, is it okay then, like we have done with other things, we vote them individually?
Yeah,
Thank you.
That's fine, yeah. Yep. If you're, would you like to sum up, Councillor?
Yes, please. So I just wanted to make it crystal clear that there's no intention in this to remove direct appointments. It clearly says in there it's around strengthening the parameters around when they are used, which indirectly applies that they will be used and they are necessary, but it's around in what circumstances. So it's not about getting rid of direct appointments. It is universally, everyone is in a competitive recruitment environment. Local government isn't special, even though we like to think we are. Everyone is in a competitive recruitment environment, so that's no reason to throw out a competitive recruitment processes and the importance of that to culture. And I wholeheartedly believe that this is in Council's remit. It's our job to set policy. We set the principles from the top. This falls clearly under our scope under the Act around policies related to the fair and equitable treatment of employees. And providing them with an opportunity to apply for roles is a large part of treating them fairly. So, yeah, I encourage you to vote in support. When it comes to the items on the website, my intention, where clearly it says there, unless there's a reasonable reason to do so, my intention was that that would be the judgment of the CEO to decide for this reason we won't publish this one. So, thank you.
Okay, so
I don't know what I'd call this as an inject. I think there's a typo in part 3. I think it should say there's a reason, but unless there's a reasonable reason not to be available.
Yeah, unless there's a reasonable reason not.
Yeah, it doesn't say not.
Sorry.
Yeah. Just thought I'd put that out there.
So part 3. The policies are published on the website unless there is a reasonable reason for it not to be published.
Okay. All right, so item 1, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Say no. Show of hands, all those in favour.
Alderman Barakis, Councillor Elliott, Councillor Passelt, Councillor Lohberger, Councillor Kelly, Councillor Dutta.
Can I just ask a question? Is that correct? There was just votes against noting an Integrity Commission report. That was point 1. There was votes against noting that. Is that right? Okay, just want to make sure I just got that right.
So all that, sorry, that was, do we?
Hey, let me go back.
It's getting late, sorry.
Can you put that again? Hang on, I'm just trying to find it. Wait on, let me.
All
think
those in favour of item 1 say aye. And all those in favour of item 1, put your hand up, please.
Alderman Barakis, Councillor Elliott, Councillor Passelt, Councillor Lohberger, Councillor Kelly, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Harvey and the Lord Mayor.
Against?
Alderman Bloomfield and the Deputy Lord Mayor. That's carried.
Okay, item 2, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no.
No.
Show of hands, all those in favour.
Alderman Barakis, Councillor Elliott, Councillor Passelt, Councillor Lohberger, Councillor Kelly, Councillor Dutta and the Lord Mayor.
And against?
Alderman Bloomfield, Councillor Harvey and the Deputy Lord Mayor. That's carried.
And item 3, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no.
No.
Show of hands, all those in favour.
Alderman Barakis, Councillor Elliott, Councillor Passelt, Councillor Kelly,
And against?
Councillor Lohberger, Alderman Bloomfield, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Harvey, the Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor. That is lost 4 votes to 6.
Okay. Moving on to item 24.
Excuse me, Lord Mayor. Gotta go.
Sorry?
I have to leave.
Okay. Councillor Elliott.
Item as put there on the public interest register policy.
Seconded by Alderman Barakis.
This motion is just asking for the recently approved policy and implemented policy, the public interest register policy, to be updated. When the policy was first implemented, we had a situation where full street addresses were published, which was not what some councillors or elected members thought was going to happen. But correctly, when I notified the officers around that, I was told that what was published matched with the policy, and that was technically correct, because in the policy itself it didn't specify that it was going to be suburbs only, or no street addresses, or only what's listed on the form. And there's been communication around this policy in terms of, I've asked some questions and I've got some answers back, but I do think that the policy on this matter, especially because it's our information and it can be sensitive information, is being put out into the public, that the policy itself should really capture all of provide all of the information that we need to have the comfort that our information we manage properly. So as it's listed here, there's a list of 7 factors, and all I'm asking for is for the policy to come back to the council just with more detail added, so that we can have more assurance around what information we published, where's it stored, who has access to it, how information gets changed, because otherwise we can make assumptions but we're not on the same page. So the point of a policy is that it's all clear and known to us from the start, and we are all on the same page, because we saw what happened with what sensitive information was published, but then the policy pretty much allowed that to happen. So yeah, I'm just hoping that the policy would come back to us with more detail added. Thank you.
And was there a seconder? Alderman Barakis. Okay, any discussion?
The council response, part 15, each elected member reviewed their declaration form, then redact from it themselves information they do not wish added back into the register. This is preferable to asking staff to second guess what information in their declaration elected members may not wish published in their register. So that's just minor details like your street address. Not that I don't want to have all these other details published, like if you own multiple properties in an area, you can't choose not to have those registered, but it's like it's only purely the street address. Like we're just going to redact our, you know, like what information do we want to redact?
Director Reynolds, did you want to? I'm not sure the question's clear, Alderman Harvey.
Well, I'm just wondering if we follow the officer's advice here, each elected member review their declaration form and then redact from it themselves information they do not wish added back to the register. So I'm assuming that's just simple things like addresses, not like I only want to declare 12 of my houses rather than 15 or whatever it is. No, it's only addresses. Yeah.
Director Reynolds, did you want to respond at all?
Through you, Lord Mayor, that is correct. Excuse me, it's just the addresses, it's not the detail per se beyond that.
Okay, if there's no further discussion or comment, questions, I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no.
Aye.
Show of hands. All those in favour.
Alderman Barakis, Councillor Elliott, Councillor Kelly.
And against?
Councillor Purcell, Councillor Lohberger, Alderman Bloomfield, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Harvey and the Lord Mayor. That motion's lost.
Okay, the last item on the agenda before the closed portion is questions without notice.
Moved.
Their responses. Okay, moved. Seconded by Councillor Posselt. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Are there any questions without notice in the open? Alderman Bloomfield.
I've been approached by members of the community regarding access to these meetings online for people who have issues with hearing impairment, and they had requested whether we could access possibly closed captions or something similar to that for these meetings, so they might also be able to participate online with this. Seems to be quite a thing now that people want to be able to participate.
Turn it on.
The response will be provided. Okay, any further questions? Councillor Posselt.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The staff have had pre-notice for these these 5 questions, which all relate specifically to events and activations. So the questions I'll just list down, and if it's on notice, that's fine. So with regards to activations and events, how many activations and events did the City of Hobart run in the last financial year? What were these events and activations in a list, please? What was the total cost of running these events and activations? What is the estimated cost in officer time to support these events? And how many FTE are dedicated to events and activations? Thank you.
Okay, Doc. Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. My question is regarding planning applications. Can some advice be provided regarding discretionary use applications? How many applications are determined within the statutory time frame?
Sorry, Alderman Barakis, isn't that better to be reported via the planning?
I thought we could ask questions. I can ask it in the planning committee, but I thought we could ask questions regarding any matter in this section.
Yeah, but there is another place that's more.
Oh, look, I'm happy to ask it next week then. That's fine.
Sure.
Yeah, that's fine.
It'll be reported in the same way, and yeah, and probably quicker if it's women. I don't know.
I've got 2 questions. Can I just have some costs on how much the council has spent in direct costs related to the Crowther statue removal, including the reinterpretation project and preparing the planning application, the different documentation around that, the direct costs, and a cost on the estimated cost on what expenses will come for, or what budget there is for the signage, the removal of the statue and the new artwork that will be commissioned. So future costs and backwards. Thank you.
All right, so all of those have been noted. We don't need to move that, but I will ask that somebody move a motion to take us into the closed portion. Moved by Alderman Barakis, seconded by Councillor Dutta. All those in favour say aye. Against say no, carried unanimously. So we will now close the open section of the meeting.